you wake in total darkness, the kind of darkness that feels almost solid, pressing gently against your open eyes like a second blanket. For a long moment you lie still, aware of the rough wool of the coverlet against your chin and the faint, musty scent of the straw-filled mattress beneath your body. The room is silent, so silent that you can hear the soft whisper of your own breath moving in and out, a steady, quiet rhythm that has been with you through all the hours of the night. There is no clock on the mantelpiece, no bell ringing from the pit, only the deep blackness that tells you the sun is still far below the horizon. Your hand moves slowly from beneath the blanket, the air cool on your skin, and reaches through the dark toward the small bedside table that you know stands within arm's reach to the left of the bed. The surface is smooth wood, polished by years of use, and your fingertips find the edge first, then the familiar shape of the tin matchbox that always rests in the same spot beside the lamp. The metal is cold, slightly dented on one corner, and as you lift it a few matches rattle inside with a dry, papery sound, a small noise that seems very loud in the stillness. You draw the box toward you, taking care not to knock against the oil lamp that shares the little table, its glass chimney invisible in the dark, but somehow present, a shape you can feel in the air. Your thumb finds the tiny catch on the side of the matchbox and presses it, the lid opening with a faint click. You reach inside and take out a single match, feeling the slim wooden stem, the rough, bulbous head that is slightly gritty to the touch. You close the box and set it back on the table with a soft tap. Then you hold the match between your thumb and forefinger, turning it slowly once, twice, a habit so old you are barely aware of doing it. The striker strip is attached to the side of the box, a narrow band of dark, rough paper, and you bring the match head against it in a single, practiced motion. There is a tiny hiss, a sound like a quick intake of breath, and then the match flares into life with a burst of yellow light that makes you squint. The flame dances for a heartbeat, small and bright and fragile, painting the nearest surfaces with a warm, wavering glow. You see the brass collar of the lamp, the curve of the glass chimney, the dark shape of the wick inside it. You lift the match carefully and bring it to the wick, holding it just above the slot where the fabric peeps through, and you watch as a tiny blue flame catches, then grows into a steady yellow tongue that lengthens and settles as you turn the small brass knob that raises the wick. The light steadies, the glass chimney warming, and now the lamp is burning with a soft amber flame that pushes the darkness back into the corners of the room. You shake the match gently until the flame goes out, a thin trail of smoke curling upward and vanishing into the shadows, and you drop the spent match into a little pottery dish that sits next to the lamp. The oil lamp gives off a gentle, even light that barely reaches the far wall, leaving the corners of the small bedroom in deep shadow. You sit up now, moving slowly, the bedclothes falling away from your shoulders, and you swing your legs over the side of the mattress. The floorboards are smooth and cold under your bare feet, the grain of the wood faintly felt through the soles. You let your hands rest on your knees, the lamp flickering on the bedside table, and you take a long, slow breath, feeling the cool air fill your lungs, letting the silence settle around you like a familiar coat. The room slowly reveals itself in the gentle glow, whitewashed walls with a few fine cracks running from the corner of the low ceiling, the dark square of a small window covered by a heavy curtain that shows not even a hint of dawn, a wooden chair standing in the corner with your work clothes draped over its back, and a simple washstand with a white pitcher and basin that gleam faintly in the lamplight. After a moment you stand, the floorboards creaking once under your weight, a sound so quiet that it seems to be absorbed immediately by the thick, still air. You pick up the lamp by its small wire handle, the metal already warm from the flame, and you carry it the 3 steps across the room to the wooden stool that waits near the foot of the bed. The stool is plain, solid, its top worn smooth by years of use, and you set the lamp down on it with care, making sure the base sits flat and steady. The light now falls differently, casting your shadow long and bent across the wall and ceiling, and it illuminates the chair where your clothes have been waiting through the night. You walk to the chair and stand before it, the cold of the early morning seeming to rise from the floorboards and wrap around your ankles. The clothes are rough and heavy, smelling faintly of coal dust, soap, and the particular mustiness of old fabric that has been worn many times. You reach first for the woolen trousers, dark and thick, with braces attached by small bone buttons. You hold them out, shake them once so that the legs fall straight, and then you step into them 1 foot at a time, the fabric scratching against your skin in a way that is so familiar it hardly registers. You pull the trousers up over your long underwear, settling the waistband comfortably against your hips, and you button the single metal button at the front, the metal cool against your fingertips. The braces hang loose for now, and you leave them dangling as you turn to the shirt. The shirt is made of heavy cotton flannel, a dull grey-brown colour with a faint stripe that has faded almost to nothing over many washings. You lift it from the back of the chair, the fabric soft and slightly damp feeling from the cold night air, and you push your arms through the sleeves, the cuffs falling loosely around your wrists. Starting at the bottom, you fasten the small flat buttons one by one, working your way up your chest, the motion slow and unhurried. Each button passes through its buttonhole with a tiny, satisfying resistance, and as you reach the collar, you leave the top button undone, the neck of the shirt sitting open against your throat. You tuck the shirt tails into the waist of the trousers, smoothing the fabric with your palms so that no bunches remain. Now you reach for the padded jacket that hangs over the back of the chair, its shape holding the memory of your shoulders. The jacket is made of a tough dark wool, lined with a softer, lighter fabric that is worn thin at the elbows and along the seams. The elbows themselves are smooth and shiny from the countless times you have leaned on them, resting your arms on a table or against a timber prop underground. You lift the jacket and slide your arms into the sleeves, the lining cool against your wrists for just a moment before it warms. You settle the jacket onto your shoulders, pull the front panels together, and begin to fasten the 5 large buttons that run down the front, each one a disc of dark, polished bone that slips through its hole with the ease of long practice. You leave the lowest button undone so the jacket does not pull when you bend, and you run your hand over the front, feeling the familiar weight of the wool against your chest. The lamp flickers gently on the stool, the flame entirely steady, but the shadows around the room seeming to dance very slightly as the air moves, perhaps stirred by your own slow movements. The glass chimney gives off a faint ring of warmth, and a very soft, almost imperceptible smell of paraffin oil drifts through the room, mixing with the cool, clean scent of the morning. The floorboards creak again as you shift your weight, and somewhere outside, far away, a single bird lets out a short, low call that stops as quickly as it began, swallowed by the darkness that still holds the world. You sit down on the edge of the wooden stool, the surface solid and unyielding beneath you, and you turn your attention to your boots. They are standing on the floor beside the stool, dark brown leather that is stiff and cold to the touch, the toes slightly scuffed, the laces tucked loosely inside the tops. You pick up the left boot and turn it over, checking the sole by habit, your thumb running over the smooth, worn leather and the few small nails that hold the heel in place. Satisfied, you set it on the floor in front of you and slide your foot inside, the boot resisting at first because the leather is cold and is contracted during the night. You work your foot deeper, wiggling your toes until they find their familiar places, and you feel the boot settle around your heel with a soft, final thud. You take up the laces, 2 long strands of rough waxed cotton that have been knotted once at the very ends to keep them from fraying. Starting at the bottom, you cross the laces over the first pair of eyelets, pulling them evenly, the leather creaking ever so slightly as it bends. You work your way upward, crossing the laces and threading them through each pair of eyelets, the motion slow and repetitive, a quiet, automatic task that your fingers have performed thousands of times. At the top you pull the laces snug but not tight, then you loop one lace over the other and pull the loop through to form a simple knot, then a second loop, and you tug the ends to make a neat bow. The bow lies flat against the tongue of the boot, and you tuck the loops behind the laces so they will not catch on anything later. You pick up the right boot, turn it over, examine the sole with the same careful habit, and then pull it on, your foot sliding into the cold leather with the same slight resistance. The boot settles around your heel and you begin to lace it, starting at the bottom and working upward with the same steady rhythm of cross, thread, pull, repeat, until you reach the top and tie the bow with the same even tension. You tuck the loops away and rest your hands on your knees, feeling the solid, familiar weight of the boots on your feet, the way they anchor you to the floor. The lamp on the stool continues to burn, its flame a small, bright tongue of light that hardly wavers, the oil inside the reservoir giving off a soft, liquid whisper as it is drawn up through the wick. The room is still and quiet, the ceiling low and the walls close, and you sit for a moment longer, letting your breathing slow, feeling the cool air on your face and the warmth of the jacket around your shoulders. The silence seems to have a texture now, thick and smooth, and it wraps around you like the quiet before a journey that has no beginning and no end, only a long, gentle continuation of all the mornings that have come before. You are dressed, the lamp is lit, and the dark world outside waits with a patience that asks nothing of you but your steady, unhurried presence. You stand from the stool, the lamp still burning steadily at your side, and you reach down to take up the small wire handle once more. The metal is warm now, almost hot to the touch, and you wrap your fingers around it carefully, lifting the lamp from the wooden seat and holding it out ahead of you at chest height. The flame stays true inside its glass chimney, and the circle of amber light shifts forward, throwing your shadow back against the wall behind you, a tall and wavering shape that bends at the corner where wall meets ceiling. You turn toward the bedroom door, your boots already heavy on the floorboards, and you begin to walk, each step measured and slow, the lamp bobbing very gently in your grip and sending ripples of light across the whitewashed walls. The door to the bedroom stands half open, just as you left it the night before, and you push it further with your free hand, the hinges giving a soft, low groan that fades almost immediately into the thick silence of the house. Beyond the door is the small landing at the top of the stairs, a space no larger than a cupboard, with bare floorboards and a single framed sampler on the wall that you can just make out in the lamplight, the stitched letters spelling something quiet and forgotten. The air here is noticeably cooler, a slight draft coming up from the stairwell and brushing past your cheeks with a faint damp touch that smells of stone and old plaster. You pause for just a moment on the landing, your lamp held still, and you listen to the house around you. A deep, dense quiet that seems to have weight, broken only by the tiny, constant hiss of the burning oil and the distant, almost imagined creak of a timber settling somewhere below. You turn to face the stairs and begin your descent, your hand carrying the lamp out before you, while the other hand reaches for the wooden banister that runs along the wall. The banister is smooth and cool under your palm, polished by the passage of many hands over many years, and your fingers curl around it loosely, not gripping, but just touching, as a guide. The stairs are narrow, the treads worn into shallow depressions in the center where countless feet have trodden, and as you take the first step down, the old wood gives a low, muffled creak, a sound that seems to come from deep within the timber and then fade into nothing. Your shadow stretches behind you and up the wall, a huge and distorted companion that follows without sound. You take each step slowly, one foot and then the other, your boots heavy on the wood, but your pace unhurried. The lamp swings with a gentle rhythmic motion that sends the light swaying across the plaster walls, picking out the small bumps and irregularities in the old surface, the faint hairline cracks that run from the corner of the stairwell ceiling, the tiny dusty cobweb that hangs from the angle of a beam. You can feel the temperature dropping slightly as you go lower, the air growing cooler and heavier, carrying the faint smell of cold ashes and bread from the kitchen below. The stairs turn once, a small square landing where you shift your weight and continue down the lower flight, and now the kitchen door comes into view at the bottom, a dark rectangle in the wavering lamplight. The kitchen door is open as it always is, and you step off the last stair onto the flagstone floor of the kitchen. The stones are cold and slightly uneven under your boots, each flagstone a different shape and size, laid down long ago and worn smooth by generations of feet. The lamp now illuminates the kitchen in a slow, sweeping arc as you move forward into the center of the room, the light reaching out to touch the familiar objects one by one, the scrubbed pine table with its 4 wooden chairs, the cast-iron range against the far wall, the tall dresser with its rows of plain crockery, the deep windowsill with its thick curtain drawn tight against the night. The room is still and cool, the air holding the quiet chill of the small hours, and everything is exactly as it was when you left it the evening before. You cross to the table, the flagstones cold under the worn soles of your boots, and you set the lamp down at the center of the tabletop, the brass base meeting the wood with a soft, solid tap. The light now radiates outward in a steady pool, picking out the grain of the scrubbed pine, a pattern of fine, wavy lines that run the length of the table like the slow currents of a river. The wood is pale and clean, scrubbed with sand and water until it feels almost soft to the touch, and in the lamplight it glows with a warm, honeyed hue. Around the lamp the shadows gather in the corners of the kitchen, thick and dark, but within the circle of light every small detail becomes clear and distinct. You stand for a moment beside the table, your hands resting on the back of one of the wooden chairs, the chair frame sturdy and simple, with a woven rush seat that has sagged slightly in the middle from years of use. The kitchen is so quiet that you can hear the tiny rhythmic tick of cooling metal somewhere inside the range, a sound so faint it might be mistaken for the beating of your own heart. The range stands against the far wall, a large solid shape of black cast iron with a closed oven door and a firebox that is now dark and still. You can see, when you look toward it, the faintest orange glow coming from the small air vent at the base, a dying nest of embers that still hold a memory of yesterday's fire beneath a coating of fine grey ash. The glow pulses very softly, almost imperceptibly, as if the embers are breathing in their sleep, and a thin ribbon of warmth still rises from the iron surface and drifts upward toward the mantelpiece. On the hob, to one side of the range, sits the tin kettle, a squat, dark shape with a dented lid and a handle that stands upright. A few drops of water still cling to its spout from the night before, catching the lamplight and shining like tiny glass beads. Next to the kettle, pushed back against the tiled splashback, is the brown earthenware teapot with its small chip on the rim, the lid slightly askew, a faint dark stain running down the side from countless pourings. The sight of the teapot is a quiet, familiar comfort, a thing that has been in this kitchen for as long as you can remember, and you look at it for a long, slow moment before you turn your attention back to the table. At the center of the table, just beside the lamp, sits a loaf of bread wrapped loosely in a clean white cloth. The cloth is plain cotton, hemmed along the edges, and it is folded over the bread in a way that you recognize as your own doing from the evening before, the corners tucked under with a neat, habitual precision. The shape of the loaf presses up against the cloth, a rounded dome with a flat base, and you reach out and lift the cloth away, folding it back to reveal the bread beneath. The loaf is a pale golden brown, the crust smooth and slightly shiny where it has been brushed with water before baking, and a few fine cracks run across the top where the dough split in the heat of the oven. The smell of it rises toward you, a mild yeasty scent that mingles with the cool air and the faint, oily smell of the lamp. You stand beside the table and break off a piece of the bread. You do this with both hands, taking hold of the loaf and pulling gently until a corner of the crust comes away with a soft, tearing sound. The inside of the bread is pale and close-textured, with a scatter of tiny holes, and a small wisp of steam, impossibly faint, rises from the torn surface and vanishes immediately. You set the larger part of the loaf back down on the table, and you hold the piece you have taken in your hand, feeling the rough crust against your palm and the soft crumb beneath your fingertips. The bread is cool but not cold, the temperature of the room, and you bring it to your mouth and take a small bite. The taste is mild and plain, a gentle flavor of wheat and salt and the slight sourness of the leaven, and you chew slowly, your jaw working with a steady, rhythmic motion that seems to belong to the silence of the kitchen. The bread is slightly chewy, and it softens as you chew, becoming a small, warm mass that you swallow with a quiet, natural ease. You take another bite, and then another, each mouthful the same steady, unremarkable comfort, and you eat standing there by the table, your gaze resting on the lamp flame that burns with a perfect stillness, the small bright point at the center of the wick never flickering, never wavering. You finish the piece of bread and brush the few crumbs from your fingers, the tiny fragments falling onto the tabletop where they scatter like pale grains of sand. Now you turn your attention to the teapot that waits on the hob, and you take the few steps across the flagstones to the range. The flagstones cool underfoot and slightly gritty, with a fine, invisible dust. The hob is still faintly warm, the cast iron holding the last trace of heat from the embers, and when you touch the teapot with your fingertips, the earthenware is cool to the touch, the surface slightly rough with its dark brown glaze. You lift the pot by its handle, the lid rattling once as you do so, and you carry it back to the table and set it down beside the lamp. Next you walk to the dresser that stands against the wall opposite the range. The dresser is tall and wooden, painted a dull cream color that has yellowed with age, and it is filled with crockery behind glass-paneled doors. You open one of the doors, the glass rattling very slightly in its frame, and you reach inside to take down a single cup. The cup is made of plain white china with a small chip on the rim that matches the chip on the teapot, as if they have been together for a very long time, and the handle is a simple loop that fits your finger comfortably. You close the dresser door with care, the latch clicking softly, and you carry the cup back to the table. You set the cup down next to the teapot, the china making a faint ringing tap against the wood, and you lift the teapot lid and set it aside. The inside of the pot is dark, the tea left from the previous evening still pooled at the bottom, a deep amber-brown liquid that reflects the lamplight in a single oily gleam. You tilt the teapot over the cup, and the tea pours out in a slow, thin stream, glugging softly as the air enters the spout. The tea is cold, entirely cold, and it fills the cup to about 3/4 full, the surface smooth and dark and still. A few tiny tea leaves have escaped the strainer and float on the surface, small dark specks that drift very slowly toward the rim. You set the teapot down and replace the lid, the earthenware making a soft, hollow sound. You lift the cup to your lips, feeling the cool china against your skin, and you take a slow sip. The tea is cold and slightly bitter, a faint, astringent taste that lingers at the back of your tongue, and it is entirely refreshing in its plain, simple way. The cold liquid slides down your throat, and you feel a small, quiet alertness spread through your body, a gentle waking of the senses that asks nothing more than to be noticed and then let go. You take another sip, slower than the first, and then another, holding the cup in both hands and letting the warmth of your fingers slowly transfer to the china, though the tea itself remains cool. Between sips, you look around the kitchen, your gaze moving slowly from the dresser to the curtained window to the dark beams of the low ceiling, and everything is calm and still and entirely at peace. When the cup is empty, you set it down on the table, the china meeting the wood with a soft, final sound, and you stand for a long moment with your hands resting on the tabletop, feeling the smooth grain of the pine beneath your palms. The lamp burns on, its flame as steady as ever, and the circle of light around you seems to have grown smaller as your eyes have adjusted to the darkness beyond. The house is utterly quiet now, a deep, settled silence that fills every corner and crevice, and you stand within it as if you are the only waking thing in the world. Then, somewhere behind you, the house creaks once. It is a low, slow sound that comes from the direction of the stairs, a single drawn-out note of old timber shifting in the cold, and it rises and falls, and then is gone. The silence that follows is even deeper than before, as if the house itself has sighed and settled back into its rest. You do not move, and the lamp continues to burn, and the kitchen remains exactly as it was, the bread on the table, the kettle on the hob, the cold teapot and the empty cup, all waiting in the steady, patient light for the slow approach of dawn. You set the empty cup down on the table, the china meeting the wood with a small, definite sound that seems to settle into the silence and become part of it. For a moment longer you stand beside the table, your hands now resting loosely at your sides, the lamplight pooling around you in a warm, steady circle that picks out the grain of the pine and the fine white dust of flour that always lingers in the cracks of the scrubbed surface. The kitchen is still, the range ticking softly as the last embers fade into ash, the curtain drawn tight against the window, the loaf of bread sitting half unwrapped beside the cold teapot. Everything is as it should be, and nothing moves except the flame in the lamp, which rises straight and true, utterly unwavering. You move now, stepping away from the table and crossing the flagstones toward the corner where the low doorway leads to the small back hall. Your boots make a series of soft, rhythmic sounds on the stone, a slow, even tread that echoes faintly off the low ceiling and the bare plaster walls. The floor here is slightly uneven, one flagstone tilting downward at a shallow angle, and your feet know this tilt without any conscious thought, adjusting your weight with a practiced automatic ease that comes from walking this same short path every morning for years. At the corner, you stop and reach up to the row of wooden pegs that are fixed to the wall just inside the back hall. The pegs are made of turned beechwood, smooth and dark with age, and they protrude from a painted board in a neat, even row. Hanging from the first peg is your cap, a simple flat cap of dark wool tweed, its brim curved into a gentle crescent, the fabric soft and slightly dusty to the touch. You lift it from the peg with one hand, turning it over once to look at the inside where the leather band has molded itself to the shape of your forehead, and then you place it on your head, pulling the brim down until it sits comfortably just above your eyebrows. The wool is cool at first but quickly warms against your scalp, and the familiar pressure of the cap around your temples is a quiet, grounding sensation. From the second peg, you take your muffler, a long strip of knitted wool in a dull, heathery grey, its ends slightly frayed where the yarn has worn thin. You loop it once around your neck, then twice, crossing the ends over your chest and tucking them loosely into the front of your jacket. The wool is soft and faintly itchy against your chin, and it carries the faint, clean smell of cold air and coal smoke from all the mornings before. You adjust the folds until they lie flat and comfortable, and then you let your hands drop to your sides once more, feeling the slight bulk of the muffler against your collarbones, a small, warm barrier between you and the cold that waits outside. The back hall is narrow, barely wider than your shoulders, its walls painted a pale, faded green that looks almost grey in the lamplight. The floor is made of the same cold flagstones that run through the kitchen, and a simple wooden door stands at the far end, its planks vertical and unpainted, the iron latch a dark, heavy shape in the centre. To one side of the door is a low wooden shelf, and it is here that you now walk, carrying the lamp with you, its light swaying very gently as you move and sending long, dancing shadows along the narrow passage. You set the lamp down on the shelf, the brass base clicking softly against the wood, and you stand for a moment looking at the flame that has burned so steadily throughout your slow morning. The glass chimney is warm, a thin ring of heat radiating from it, and the small brass knob that controls the wick is still in the same position you set it to when you first lit the lamp upstairs. You reach out now and take hold of this knob between your thumb and forefinger, turning it very slowly to the left, and as you do so the wick descends and the flame begins to shrink, its bright yellow tongue lowering and dimming until it is a tiny blue teardrop, barely visible at the rim of the brass collar, and then, with a final soft puff, it goes out. The lamp releases a thin, curling wisp of smoke that smells of hot oil and burnt cotton, and then the glass begins to cool and the back hall is plunged into a darkness so complete that you can see nothing at all. You stand still in the blackness, letting your eyes begin the slow work of adjusting. There is no light anywhere, no crack beneath the door, no glimmer from the kitchen window, because the curtain is so thick and the night outside so dark. The darkness feels heavy and soft, pressing against your face and hands like cool, dry velvet, and the silence of the house deepens, settling around you like a second blanket. You can hear your own breathing, slow and even, the air moving quietly through your nostrils and down into your chest, and you can feel the steady, patient beat of your heart. A distant, muffled rhythm that is so constant you are rarely aware of it. You take a step toward the door, your hand reaching out and finding the rough grain of the wooden planks, the surface cool and slightly gritty with the fine invisible dust that seems to settle everywhere in a miner's cottage. Your fingers trace the edges of the boards, feeling the small gaps where the wood has shrunk over the years, and then they find the iron latch, a curved, heavy piece of metal that is cold and smooth. You lift the latch with a single, easy motion, the metal bar rising against the spring with a soft, oiled click that sounds very loud in the narrow space. The sound echoes once, a tiny metallic ring that bounces off the close walls and then fades into nothing, and the door swings inward just a fraction, opening a narrow gap that shows a sliver of the outside world, a strip of deep charcoal darkness that is somehow slightly less dense than the blackness of the hall. You pull the door fully open now, and the cold air comes in at once, not as a gust or a wind, but as a steady, quiet presence that flows through the opening and wraps itself around your face and hands and the exposed skin of your neck. It is cold, certainly cold, the kind of damp, penetrating cold that comes in the hours before dawn, when the earth has given up all the warmth it stored during the previous day. It carries with it the faint, sour smell of coal smoke, a smell that hangs permanently in the air of the village, so familiar that you hardly notice it anymore, and beneath that the clean, mineral scent of wet stone and the deeper, earthier smell of the lane outside, a smell of packed dirt and cobbles and the moss that grows in the cracks between them. The air touches your cheeks with a cool, damp pressure that makes the tiny hairs on your skin stand upright, and you feel the cold enter your nostrils and travel down into your lungs, a crisp, sharp sensation that is entirely refreshing. You step forward now, crossing the threshold and planting your boot onto the stone doorstep that lies just outside the door. The step is a single, broad block of grey sandstone, worn into a shallow depression in the centre, where the feet of your family have trodden for many years, and it feels solid and unyielding beneath your sole. You pull the door closed behind you, guiding it gently with your hand until the latch clicks back into place, and then you let go and stand upright, your arms falling to your sides, your shoulders relaxing under the heavy wool of your jacket. The house behind you is now sealed, the lamp cold on its shelf, the kitchen table holding the bread and the teapot and the empty cup, all of it waiting in the dark for the return of light and the slow resumption of the day. You pause on the doorstep, making no move to walk further, and you let your eyes continue their slow adjustment to the darkness of the outside world. The sky overhead is a deep, muted charcoal, a vast, soft dome that arches over the village and the valley and the low hills beyond, and scattered across it are the stars, tiny points of cold white light that seem very far away and very still. There is no moon tonight, or if there is, it is already set behind the rooftops, and the stars are the only source of light above you, their faint glow barely touching the outlines of the cottages and the chimney pots and the distant shadowy shape of the pithead winding gear on the horizon. The darkness here is not as absolute as it was inside the hall, and you can begin to make out shapes now. The dark, squat silhouette of the water butt beside the door, the low stone wall that marks the edge of the small front garden, the narrow lane that runs past the row of cottages and slopes gently downward toward the main road. You breathe in again, slowly and deeply, and as you exhale your breath emerges as a soft white cloud that billows outward and then drifts upward, thinning and dispersing into the dark air until it is no longer visible. The mist of your breath catches the faint starlight for just a moment, a pale, ghostly wisp that hangs before your face and then is gone, vanishing into the night. You take another breath, watching the same small cloud form and fade, and the simple, rhythmic process of your own breathing becomes a quiet focus, a gentle anchor in the stillness of the early morning. The doorstep beneath your feet is cold and slightly rough, its surface pitted with tiny holes where the softer parts of the stone have worn away over the years, and you can feel the chill of the sandstone seeping upward through the thick leather of your boots, a gradual, distant cold that will not reach your skin for a long while yet. You shift your weight slightly, the leather of your boots creaking once, and the sound is small and isolated, swallowed immediately by the immense, enveloping quiet of the pre-dawn world. The lane before you stretches away into the darkness, a narrow ribbon of cobbles and packed earth that runs between the two facing rows of terraced cottages. The cottages themselves are dark, every window curtained and still, the brickwork a uniform grey-black in the starlight, the roofs a steep, sharp pitch of dark slate tiles that gleam very faintly where a little dew has settled. The chimney pots stand in silhouette against the sky, thin and upright, and from a few of them a thin, lazy trickle of smoke still rises, the remnants of last night's fires that have smouldered on through the small hours. The smoke climbs very slowly, almost vertically, until it reaches a certain height, and then drifts apart, spreading into a vague, diffuse haze that hangs low over the rooftops and gives the air its familiar, acrid tang. No light shows in any window, not the faintest glimmer of a candle or a lamp, and the doors are all firmly shut, their iron latches and knobs just visible as small dark shapes against the wood. The village is asleep, every man, woman and child still wrapped in their blankets, their breathing slow and deep, their dreams quiet and unremembered. You are the only one awake, the only one standing under the wide, star-scattered sky, and the sense of solitude is complete and entirely peaceful. There is no loneliness in it, only a calm, spacious stillness that seems to hold the entire world in a patient, gentle pause. You take another breath, and the white mist of your exhalation rises once more, and as it fades, you become aware of a sound. It is very far away and very small, a thin, high note that cuts through the silence for just a moment and then stops. It is the call of a single bird, somewhere down the lane to your left, a brief, clear whistle that rises and falls and then vanishes as quickly as it came. You stand perfectly still, listening, but the bird does not call again, and the silence returns, deeper and more complete than before, as if the sound had been a small stone dropped into a vast, still pond, and the ripples have now smoothed away. The bird, perhaps a robin or a blackbird, has settled back into its roost, and the darkness remains undisturbed. You let out a slow breath, and now you look upward again, tilting your head back and letting your gaze wander across the field of stars. The longer you look, the more stars you see, tiny faint pinpricks that emerge slowly from the deep charcoal of the sky, filling the spaces between the brighter points. The constellations are there, though you do not know their names, familiar passants that have turned above the village every night of your life. The sky seems very deep, layer upon layer of darkness, stretching away into an unimaginable distance, and the stars seem to hang there with a perfect, motionless patience that is very calming to observe. You lower your gaze after a time, the cold air beginning to nip at the tips of your ears beneath the cap, and you look once more at the dark lane, the silent cottages, the faint threads of smoke rising from the chimneys into the still air, and you feel a quiet readiness begin to stir somewhere deep within you, a gentle, wordless impulse to begin the slow walk toward the pit. The stone doorstep is cold beneath your boots as you take that first, deliberate step forward, shifting your full weight from the threshold of your cottage onto the narrow footpath that runs along the lane. The path is made of the same grey sandstone flags as the doorstep, laid end to end in a slightly uneven line, and the first flag gives a tiny, almost imperceptible wobble under your sole before settling against the packed earth beneath it. You know this wobble well, have known it for years, and your body adjusts without thought, your ankle flexing just enough to keep your balance steady as you move fully onto the path and begin to walk. The lamplight is gone now, left behind in the dark kitchen, and your eyes have adjusted enough to the starlight that the lane ahead of you appears as a faint, shadowy corridor, the two rows of cottages standing like quiet, patient shoulders on either side. Your boots, those same heavy leather boots you laced upstairs, now meet the surface of the lane itself, stepping off the sandstone flags and onto the cobbles that form the main carriageway. The cobbles are rounded, smooth, set closely together in a bed of packed sand and fine gravel, and as your first foot comes down, the sound begins. It is a hollow, steady sound, a deep, low-pitched clop that rises from the contact of leather with stone, and it seems to travel outward, bouncing off the brick walls of the cottages and echoing very softly down the length of the lane. The echo is not loud or sharp, but rather a gentle, muted repetition that hangs in the cold air for a brief moment before fading, and then your second foot comes down, and the sound repeats, a second hollow thud that overlaps with the dying tail of the first, creating a slow, walking rhythm that is as regular and as calming as the beat of a drowsy heart. You walk on, step after step, and the rhythm establishes itself quickly, a pattern so ingrained in your body that you no longer need to think about it at all. Left, right, each boot lifting and then descending, the leather creaking ever so slightly at the ankle, the cobbles pressing upward against the worn soles. The sound of your footsteps seems very loud in the quiet street, the only distinct noise in the whole world, and yet it does not disturb the silence but rather becomes a part of it, a steady, predictable thread that runs through the fabric of the early morning dark. The cottages on either side absorb the sound and then give it back, a soft, reflected echo that follows you like a quiet companion, never quite catching up, never falling behind. You pass the first cottage after your own, its frontage identical in every way. The same plain brickwork, the same dark painted door, the same small window with its thick curtain drawn tightly across the glass. No light shines under the door, no glow edges around the curtain, and the window reflects only the faint, cold starlight from the sky, a tiny dull gleam that makes the glass look solid and black. You look at this window as you pass, your gaze moving across it slowly, and you see nothing but the dark, still shape of the curtain and the tiny, motionless shadow of the window frame. The cottage is silent, its occupants deep in the heavy, motionless sleep of the small hours, and you walk past it with the same quiet, even tread, leaving it behind as the lane continues to slope gently downward. The slope of the lane is a constant, gentle decline, no more than a few degrees, but it is enough that you feel it in your body as you walk, a subtle shift of weight that tilts you very slightly forward and makes your stride lengthen just a little on the downhill step. Your shoulders lean forward a fraction, your center of gravity lowering, and your boots strike the cobbles with a slightly different sound now, a fraction heavier on the downhill foot, a fraction lighter on the uphill. It is a rhythm that you have walked thousands of times, in all weathers and all seasons, and your legs know exactly how to adjust, your knees bending just enough, your hips rotating with a smooth, almost imperceptible motion that carries you forward without hurry or effort. The lane itself is narrow, barely wide enough for a cart to pass, and it is bordered on both sides by the low stone walls of the tiny front gardens, walls made of the same rough, dark stone that paves the paths. In the darkness, these walls appear as simple, solid lines of blackness, their top edges just visible against the slightly lighter charcoal of the road. Small clumps of moss grow in the cracks between the stones, though you cannot see them now, and in the daylight they are a vivid, bright green that stands out against the grey. But now they are just a soft, damp texture that your fingers might feel if you reached out to touch them, a cool, spongy surface that holds the moisture of the night. As you walk, you pass the second cottage, the third, the fourth, each one a repeat of the one before, the same dark windows, the same drawn curtains, the same silent doors. The chimneys stand in a row above the roofline, and from a few of them the thin, lazy trickles of smoke continue to rise, barely visible against the sky. Just the faintest, palest grey threads that climb straight upward and then dissolve into nothing. The smoke smells of coal and wood and old ash, a smell that hangs in the cold air and mixes with the damp mineral scent of the cobbles and the faint, clean smell of the dew that is beginning to settle on every surface. You breathe in this mixture as you walk, your nose and mouth drawing in the cold, sharp air, and you breathe out the same white mist that you breathe out in the doorstep, a steady, rhythmic cloud that forms and fades with every step. A little way ahead, perhaps 30 paces down the lane, a movement catches the edge of your vision. You do not start or pause, for the movement is small and quiet and entirely unthreatening, but your eyes shift toward it with a slow, calm attention. From behind a water butt that stands at the corner of a cottage, a cat slides out into the open lane. The water butt is a large, dark barrel, its wooden staves black with moisture and bound with iron hoops, and the cat emerges from the narrow gap behind it with a fluid, silent motion, its body low and sinuous, its tail held straight out behind. The cat is a common tabby, its coat a pattern of dark stripes and lighter grey that blends almost perfectly with the shadows, and it stops in the middle of the lane and turns its head to look at you. You continue to walk, your pace unchanged, and you look back at the cat with the same steady, quiet gaze. The cat's eyes are large and round, catching the starlight with a faint greenish glow, and its ears are pricked forward, alert but not alarmed. It watches you for a long moment, its body perfectly still, its tail giving a single slow twitch at the very tip, and then As if it has seen exactly what it needed to see and found nothing of interest, it turns its head away and pads silently across the cobbles toward a narrow passage that runs between two cottages on the opposite side of the lane. Its paws make no sound at all on the stones, and it moves with that peculiar, liquid grace that cats possess, slipping into the dark mouth of the passage and vanishing as completely as if it had never been there. The passage swallows it up, and the lane is empty again, the only movement, the steady, gentle rise and fall of your own stride, the only sound, the hollow, rhythmic beat of your boots on the cobbles. You pass the spot where the cat stood, and your boots fall on the same cobbles that the cat's paws touched just moments before, but the stones are cold and unmarked, giving no sign of the small, brief encounter. The water butt stands dripping very slowly, a single drop of water falling from the tap at its base every few seconds, a tiny musical plink that punctuates the silence with a gentle, irregular rhythm. The sound is so soft that you almost do not hear it, and it fades behind you as you walk on, absorbed by the cobbles and the walls and the dense, heavy air. The lane continues to slope downward, and now you approach a slight bend, a gentle curve that swings the row of cottages around to the left before straightening again further down. At the bend, the cobbles are worn smoother than elsewhere, polished by the countless cartwheels and horses' hooves and miners' boots that have passed over them, and your footing changes subtly, the soles of your boots finding a slightly more slippery surface, a faint, slick sheen that glistens with the barest trace of dew. You adjust your stride without thinking, shortening your step just a little, and placing your feet more firmly, feeling the texture of the stones through the leather of your boots. The wall on the outside of the bend is lower here, just a single course of stone, and beyond it the ground falls away into the darkness of the valley, a wide open space that you cannot see but can sense, a vast empty presence that makes the air feel colder and the sky feel wider. At the bend you pause, not a full stop, but a slowing, a momentary hesitation that is not born of uncertainty, but of a deep habitual awareness of the path. You know this bend as well as you know the feel of your own bed, the exact degree of the curve, the precise location of the loose cobble near the center of the lane that wobbles if you step on it directly. That loose cobble is there now, just ahead of your left foot, and you step around it with an automatic, unthinking grace, your boot landing on the firm stone beside it. The loose cobble remains still, and you carry on, the bend straightening out before you, the lane opening up again into its familiar narrow tunnel of brick and shadow. And now, beneath the steady rhythm of your footsteps, you become aware of another sound. It is a sound that has been there all along, since the moment you stepped out of your door, but it is so constant, so deeply woven into the background of the world, that you have not noticed it until this moment. It is a low, continuous hum, a deep, thrumming note that vibrates in the air and travels up through the cobbles into the soles of your boots, a sound that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. This is the sound of the winding engine at the pit, the great steam-powered wheel that turns day and night, drawing the cages up and down the shaft, and its hum is the permanent music of the village, a bass note that never ceases, never wavers, never changes its pitch. You have heard this sound every morning of your working life, and it is so familiar that you do not so much hear it as feel it, a low, distant vibration that hums in your chest and in the back of your jaw, a steady, reassuring presence that tells you the pit is awake, the machinery turning, the shift waiting. The hum grows very slightly louder as you walk, though the change is so gradual that you cannot pinpoint the exact moment it increases. It is simply that the sound is a little more present now, a little more distinct, and it joins with the rhythm of your footsteps to create a two-part harmony, the low, continuous drone of the engine and the steady, percussive beat of your boots, drone and thud, repeating over and over in the darkness. The cold air carries the sound well, the dense, moist atmosphere acting as a conductor that transmits the vibration from the pit head a mile away up the valley and into the lane, and you walk now with that hum as your constant companion, a sound so deep and low that it seems to come from the earth itself. You pass more cottages, the same drawn curtains, the same dark doors, the same thin trickles of smoke, and your pace remains steady, unhurried, the same slow, easy stride that has carried you down this lane 1,000 times before. The sky overhead is beginning to change, though the change is so subtle that you would not notice it if you did not know to look for it. The deep charcoal blackness has lightened by the very smallest degree, the stars still bright, but the spaces between them now a shade less absolute, a faint, barely perceptible hint of deep blue entering the zenith. It is not dawn, not by any measure, but it is the first faint suggestion that dawn will eventually come, the sky beginning its slow, gradual transition from night to morning. The light, if it can be called light, is so faint that it casts no shadow and illuminates nothing, but it is there, a tiny, quiet promise in the high, distant dome above the village. Your muffler has grown warm against your neck, the wool absorbing the heat of your skin and holding it close, and your hands, which you have kept loosely at your sides, are beginning to feel the cold more keenly now, the tips of your fingers growing slightly numb in the chill, damp air. You do not mind this cold, for it is a familiar sensation, a part of the morning ritual as much as the bread and the cold tea and the lacing of the boots, and you flex your fingers as you walk, curling them into loose fists and then straightening them, feeling the blood move sluggishly through the small veins. Your breath continues to mist before your face, a soft white plume that forms and vanishes, a tiny fleeting ghost that accompanies you down the lane. Far ahead, where the lane meets the wider road that leads to the pit, the single gas lamp stands on its iron bracket, and you can see now the faintest glow of it in the distance, a tiny yellow point of light that flickers and wavers in the cold air. It is the first artificial light you have seen since you extinguished your own lamp, and it draws your gaze toward it, a small, warm beacon in the darkness. The glow seems to pulse slightly, the gas flame dancing with a slow, steady rhythm, and as you walk toward it, the cobbles beneath your feet begin to grow just a little more distinct, their rounded shapes emerging from the darkness as faint grey outlines against the darker sand that fills the gaps between them. The world is still dark, still quiet, still wrapped in the heavy blanket of the early morning, but it is beginning, very slowly, to reveal itself, one small detail at a time. The gas lamp is closer now, its yellow glow no longer a distant point, but a small, distinct orb of light that hangs in the darkness, like a low, steady star. You can see the iron bracket that holds it, a black, curving arm that extends from the brick wall of the corner cottage, its shape solid and plain against the deep charcoal of the sky. The lamp itself is a simple construction of metal and glass, a square lantern with 4 panes of frosted glass that diffuse the flame inside into a soft, even glow, and the light spills outward in a circle that falls across the cobblestones in the pavement and the lower part of the cottage wall, painting everything within its reach with a gentle amber tint. The flame inside the glass flickers very slightly, a quick shivering motion that is barely visible, and it makes the shadows at the edge of the light seem to breathe, expanding and contracting with a slow, hypnotic rhythm. You continue to walk, your pace unchanged, the sound of your boots still that same hollow, steady beat on the cobbles, and as you draw nearer to the lamp, the darkness begins to recede around you. The walls of the cottages on either side emerge more clearly from the night, their bricks showing as individual, dark red rectangles, their mortar joints pale grey lines that run in neat horizontal courses. The slates on the roofs catch a faint, dull gleam, their edges just touched by the upward reach of the lamplight, and the chimney pots, which were only silhouettes before, now reveal their squat, cylindrical shapes, their rims crusted with a pale, powdery soot. The lamp hisses softly, a very quiet, continuous whisper that comes from the gas jet inside the lantern, a sound that is high and thin and slightly sibilant, and it blends with the low hum of the pit engine to form a duet of constant, soothing background noise. The corner cottage, the one from which the bracket extends, is slightly larger than the others, a house that might once have belonged to an overlooker or a foreman, and its front door is painted a dark green that appears almost black in the night. The brass doorknob gleams with a tiny warm highlight, a single point of reflected lamplight that catches your eye and then releases it. The window beside the door has a lace curtain behind the glass, and through the curtain you can see the faintest suggestion of a darker shape within, perhaps a vase on a sill or the back of a wooden chair, but it is too dim to be certain, and your gaze passes over it without lingering. A small iron boot scraper stands on the doorstep, its horizontal blade worn thin and bright along the top edge, and a single fallen leaf, brown and curled, is caught against its base, motionless in the still air. You step into the circle of lamplight now, crossing the boundary where the darkness ends and the glow begins, and the transition is so gradual that there is no single moment when you can say you have left the night behind. The light touches your boots first, illuminating the scuffed dark leather and the knotted laces and the tiny embedded grains of coal dust that cling to the stitching. Then the light climbs up your legs, across the heavy wool of your trousers, and over the front of your padded jacket, picking out each button and the folds of the fabric and the rough, frayed edge of your muffler where it tucks into your collar. Your hands, still slightly numb with cold, appear in the glow as pale, strong shapes, with the knuckles just visible, and as you walk they swing gently at your sides, passing from light to shadow and back again, with the rhythm of your stride. Your shadow, which has been stretched out behind you as a long, indistinct smear of darkness, now swings around to your left as you enter the lamplight, pivoting on the soles of your boots and stretching away across the cobbles at a sharp angle. The shadow is a tall, thin version of yourself, its head reaching up the wall of the opposite cottage and bending over the eaves, its shoulders broad and its legs impossibly long, and it moves with a quiet, fluid grace that is both exactly like you and entirely different. The shadow slides over the brickwork, distorting over the uneven surface, stretching and compressing as you move, and you watch it without really watching, your eyes taking in the image without any particular thought, a familiar companion that has walked with you through the light of every lamp you have ever passed. The gas lamp hisses overhead, and now that you are directly beneath it, you can hear the sound more clearly, a thin, steady stream of gas escaping from the jet and burning with a soft, continuous roar that is not really a roar at all, but a gentle, feathery sound, like the distant rush of wind through a small opening. The glass panes of the lantern are warm, a faint heat radiating outward that you can feel on the top of your cap as you pass underneath, a tiny, brief sensation of warmth that touches your scalp through the wool and then is gone. The iron bracket creaks once, a small metallic sound that comes from the expansion and contraction of the metal in the cold, and the lamp flickers momentarily, the flame shivering behind the frosted glass, then it steadies again and the light flows outward as smoothly as before. You walk through the very center of the circle of light, where the cobbles are painted with a bright golden sheen that makes them look almost wet, though they are dry beneath the dew. The rounded stones shine as if they have been polished, their tops gleaming, their sides in deep shadow, and the sand between them is a dark fine grit that crunches very softly under your boots. You can see every detail of the ground here, the small flat pebble that has been pressed into the sand by a cartwheel, the tiny green fleck of moss that grows in the damp crack between two stones, the faint dark stain where a horse once stood and left its mark. The world is illuminated with a quiet, meticulous clarity, and you observe it all as you pass, your gaze drifting downward, taking in these small, ordinary things without attachment or curiosity. Your face is now bathed in the lamplight, and the warmth of the glow, though slight, touches your cheeks and your nose and the skin around your eyes, a gentle amber kiss that contrasts with the cold air just beyond the circle. The light brings out the color of your skin, the faint weathered tan that comes from years of working in the dim glow of the pit lamps, and it catches the tiny lines at the corners of your eyes, the soft, deep creases that have formed from a lifetime of squinting into the dark. Your cap brim casts a narrow shadow across your forehead, a dark band that runs from temple to temple, and your eyes, which have been wide and adjusted to the darkness, now narrow just a fraction, the pupils contracting in the increased light. You pass the lamp, and as you do so, the light begins to slide away from you. It moves from your chest to your right shoulder, then to your arm, then to the back of your hand, and then you are emerging on the far side of the circle, the darkness reaching out to claim you once more. Your shadow, which had been stretched out to your left, now swings forward, sliding across the cobbles and leaping upward onto the wall of a cottage, stretching into an even longer, thinner shape as you move further from the light. The shadow bends at the corner where the wall meets the lane, folding in half and then straightening again as the angle of the lamp changes, and it becomes a huge, distorted giant that takes 3 enormous strides for every one of yours. The lane opens out now as you pass the last of the terraced cottages, and the tight enclosed feeling of the narrow street begins to loosen. On your left, the row of houses comes to an end, and a low, open space replaces it. A dark, empty area that in the daylight is a small patch of common ground where children sometimes play and women hang their washing on lines strung between iron poles. Now it is just a black, empty rectangle of rough grass and bare earth, its surface invisible, its boundary marked by a low, broken fence of wooden posts and wire that you can just make out against the slightly lighter darkness of the ground. The open space lets the cold air move more freely, and a very faint, barely perceptible breeze stirs against your cheek, a tiny, cool current that comes from the direction of the valley and carries the distant, fresh smell of wet fields and the colder, cleaner scent of the open country beyond the village. The lane becomes a road now, a wider, straighter thoroughfare that runs parallel to the valley floor, and the cobbles give way to flagstones laid in a smooth, even pavement along one side, while the centre of the road remains cobbled for the carts and wagons. The transition from the intimate, closed-in lane to this broader, more open space is a quiet, gradual shift, and you feel it as a slight sense of expansion in your chest, a subtle, physical awareness that the world has opened up around you. Your footsteps change their sound again, the hollow clop of the cobbles replaced by a flatter, duller thud on the pavement flags, a sound that does not echo as much but seems to be absorbed immediately by the open air. The gas lamp is behind you now, still burning steadily on its bracket, its circle of light a warm yellow island that glows in the darkness and grows slowly smaller as you walk away. You do not turn to look back at it, but you are aware of its presence behind you, a comforting, familiar glow that has lit your way for as long as you can remember. The light from the lamp reaches out along the road for a little distance, its furthest rays touching the flagstones just ahead of your feet and painting them with a faint, amber wash that fades as quickly as it appears. After another dozen steps, the last trace of the lamplight is gone, and the world ahead is dark again, a deep, velvety blackness that stretches out toward the pit head, which you cannot yet see but can feel, a heavy, industrial presence waiting at the end of the road. The road is straight now, a long, level line that runs for perhaps half a mile before it reaches the pit gates, and it is bordered on the left by the open common ground, and on the right by a row of slightly larger, more widely spaced cottages, these ones with small front gardens and low stone walls and gates made of wrought iron. The cottages are dark, every window blind and silent, but here and there a thin line of smoke rises from a chimney, a pale, grey thread that lifts into the air and catches the faint, far-off starlight, glowing very softly for a moment before it dissipates. One of the gardens has a small, leafless tree, its thin branches forming a delicate, black tracery against the sky, and as you pass it, you hear the faint, dry rattle of a single twig moving in the breeze, a tiny, brittle sound that comes and goes. Your pace remains the same, that slow, steady stride that you have maintained since you left your doorstep, and the rhythm of your footsteps, the breath misting before your face, the low hum of the winding engine, and the hiss of the gas lamp fading behind you, all combine to create a quiet, repetitive cocoon of sound and sensation that is deeply calming. The cold air has numbed the tips of your ears beneath your cap, and your nose feels cool and slightly pinched, and you are aware of these sensations as if they belong to someone else, distant and mild and entirely without urgency. The road stretches out ahead, a pale grey ribbon in the darkness, its flagstones just visible as faint, rectangular outlines, its centre cobbles a darker, rougher strip that runs down the middle. A second bird calls from somewhere on the common ground, a single, clear note that pierces the silence, higher and sharper than the first bird you heard earlier, and it calls 3 times in quick succession before falling silent. The call hangs in the air for a moment, a lingering silvery thread of sound, and then it fades, and the silence rushes back in to fill the gap. You listen, your stride never faltering, and you hear in the distance, very far away now, the faint, answering call of another bird, a distant, thin echo that comes from the direction of the valley floor. And then that too is gone, and the only sounds are your boots on the pavement, your breath in the cold air, and the deep, eternal hum of the pit. Far ahead, the silhouette of the pit-head winding gear is beginning to resolve itself against the sky. It has been there all along, a dark, angular shape that you have been walking towards since the moment you stepped out of your door, but now it is closer and more distinct. A black lattice of vertical and diagonal beams, a tall, narrow chimney, the dark, solid block of the engine house with its high, arched windows. The winding wheels at the top of the headframe are turning, two great, dark circles that rotate against the sky, their iron spokes moving with a slow, ponderous rhythm, and the steel cables that run over them gleam faintly, catching a hint of starlight as they spool and unspool. The pithead is the heart of this valley, the reason for the cottages and the road and the gas lamp and the men who walk in the darkness, and you move toward it now with the same steady, unhurried pace. The road straight and true, the sky above beginning very slowly to pale toward the deep, muted blue that precedes the dawn. The silhouettes of the pithead grow steadily larger as you walk, its black angles and vertical lines resolving into a clearer and more detailed shape against the slowly lightening sky. The road remains straight and level, its pavement flags passing beneath your boots with the same dull, even thud that has become the background rhythm of your journey, and you keep your eyes on the dark structure ahead, watching as it reveals itself bit by bit. The winding gear is the tallest part, a high, latticed framework of iron and timber that rises from the ground in a series of cross-braced beams, and at its very top, the two great winding wheels turn slowly against the deep charcoal of the heavens. The wheels are enormous circles of dark iron, their spokes radiating from a central hub, like the petals of a cold mechanical flower, and they rotate with a smooth, continuous motion that seems almost liquid in the dim light, one wheel turning clockwise while the other turns counterclockwise, the steel cables running over their grooved rims and descending into the darkness of the shaft below. The cables themselves are thick, dark ropes that gleam with a dull, oily sheen where the starlight catches them, and they move with a faint whispering sound that you can just begin to hear now, a sound like a distant breathy sigh that rises and falls as the wheels turn. Beside the headframe stands the chimney, a tall, square pillar of dark brick that tapers slightly as it rises, its top ringed with an iron band that is just visible against the sky. From the chimney, a thin grey plume of steam and smoke issues in a continuous, lazy stream, rising straight upward for a dozen feet and then bending very slightly to the east, caught by the same faint breeze that stirred the dead twig in the garden you passed earlier. The smoke is pale and soft, almost white in the starlight, and it carries with it the familiar smell of the pit, a mixture of coal smoke and hot oil, and the damp, earthy scent of deep rock. The engine house is a low, solid building of dark brick that squats beside the headframe, its roof a steep pitch of slate with a row of small, arched windows set high in the walls, each window glowing with a faint, yellow light from the lamps and furnaces within. The light from these windows is dim and steady, a warm, amber glow that spills out onto the yard and creates small, pale rectangles on the dark ground. The road brings you closer, and now you can see the perimeter of the pit yard, a low stone wall that runs around the entire site and separates the industrial world of the mine from the cottages and lanes of the village. The wall is made of the same grey sandstone as the doorstep of your cottage, and it is topped with a simple coping of flat stones that fit together without mortar. A gap in the wall marks the entrance, a wide opening without gates that allows the coal wagons and the men to pass through freely, and as you approach this gap, the sounds of the pit grow louder and more distinct. The low hum of the winding engine, which you have been hearing as a distant background drone throughout your walk, now becomes a deeper, more physical vibration that you can feel in the soles of your boots and in the bones of your jaw. The hum is accompanied by other sounds now, a series of metallic clanks and thuds that come from the direction of the engine house, the steady, rhythmic cuff of the steam piston that drives the winding wheels, and the occasional distant rattle of a coal tub being shunted along iron rails somewhere in the darkness beyond the shaft. You cross the threshold of the pit yard, stepping through the gap in the stone wall and onto the ground within. The surface beneath your boots changes immediately. The smooth pavement flags giving way to a rough, uneven surface of packed cinders and crushed stone, and your footsteps now make a different sound, a gritty, crunching noise that seems louder and more emphatic than before. The cinders are small black fragments of burnt coal and shale, and they shift under your weight with a soft grinding sensation, your boots sinking slightly into the loose surface and leaving shallow impressions that fill in slowly behind you. The yard is a wide, open space, its far boundaries lost in the darkness, and the ground slopes very gently toward the pit head, guiding you forward with an almost imperceptible incline that your legs notice without conscious thought. The smell of the pit is strong here, stronger than it was in the lane or on the road, a dense, complex mixture of scents that fills your nostrils and settles on the back of your tongue. The dominant note is coal dust, a fine black powder that hangs in the air as an invisible cloud and coats every surface with a dark, velvety film. Beneath the coal dust is the smell of steam, hot and wet, with a faint metallic tang from the iron pipes and boilers. And beneath that is the smell of old timber, the creosote-soaked beams and planks that support the tunnels and the shaft, a dark, oily scent that is almost sweet. There is also the smell of lamp oil, the same paraffin that you burned in your own lamp at home, and the smell of damped stone, the cool, mineral breath of the earth itself, exhaling from the deep shaft and spreading out across the yard. You walk across the cinder yard, your pace still steady, and you become aware of movement around you, small, dark shapes that detach themselves from the shadows and move in the same direction you are heading. These are the other miners, men like yourself, who have risen from their beds in the darkness, dressed in their heavy clothes, and walked the lanes and roads to the pit. They move with the same slow, silent gait, their boots crunching on the cinders, their bodies wrapped in jackets and mufflers, their caps pulled low over their foreheads. No one speaks. No one calls out a greeting, for the morning is too early for words and the cold air has a way of discouraging unnecessary sound. But there is a quiet, unspoken recognition that passes between the dark figures, a sense of shared purpose and familiar routine that needs no expression. Each man carries a lamp, and these lamps bob and sway as their bearers walk, a constellation of tiny yellow stars that move slowly across the black floor of the yard and converge on the shaft. The lamps are Davy lamps, the same kind you use underground, with their tall glass chimneys and their brass caps, and the flames inside them burn with the same steady, unwavering light. The lamps throw small circles of amber glow onto the cinders, and as the men walk, their shadows swing and overlap, creating a shifting, complex pattern of dark and light that moves across the ground like a slow, silent dance. You watch these lights as you walk, your eyes following their gentle, rhythmic motion, and you see how each lamp illuminates the face of its bearer for a brief moment, revealing a weathered cheek, a heavy brow, the dark hollow of an eye socket, and then the light passes on and the face disappears back into the darkness. The cage waits at the shaft mouth, a heavy rectangular frame of iron and timber that sits on the wooden guides at the very edge of the pit. The cage is open on two sides with a low iron railing around its perimeter and a solid roof of thick planks that is black with coal dust. It stands motionless for now, its floor level with the ground, and the two steel cables from the winding wheels above descend through the head frame and attach to its upper corners with massive iron clevises and pins. The cables are taut, humming with the tension of the suspended weight, and they vibrate very slightly, a tiny, rapid shiver that you can see when you look closely at the point where they join the cage. The shaft itself is a dark, square opening in the ground, surrounded by a low wooden fence with a gate on one side, and the mouth of the shaft exhales a steady current of damp, cool air that smells of deep earth and ancient rock. This air rises from the depths in a continuous, invisible stream, and as you approach you feel it on your face, a cool, moist breath that carries with it the faintest hint of the miles of tunnels and the coal seam that lies far below. A small group of men has already gathered beside the cage, standing in a loose, silent cluster near the gate in the wooden fence. You join them, finding a space at the edge of the group and standing with your hands at your sides, your lamp held loosely in your grip, its flame burning steadily behind the glass. The men are all dressed as you are, in thick trousers and heavy jackets and mufflers and caps, and they stand with the same patient, motionless stance, their faces half hidden in the shadows, their breath misting before them in slow, rhythmic clouds. No one speaks, but there is a quiet, comfortable silence among them, a shared stillness that is not awkward or strained, but easy and familiar. Some of the men have been walking together from the same lane, some have come from other parts of the village, and they stand now side by side, waiting for the onsetter to signal that the cage is ready. The onsetter is a stocky man in a thick dark coat and a bowler hat, and he stands near the shaft gate with a wooden lever in his hand, the lever that controls the signaling bell and the cage doors. He watches the men gather with a calm, impassive expression, his face illuminated by a single lamp that hangs from a post beside the shaft. The lamp on the post is larger than the hand lamps, with a broader wick and a brighter flame, and it casts a wide, steady circle of light that illuminates the cage and the shaft mouth and the front of the group of waiting men. In this light, you can see the details of the cage more clearly, the thick wooden planks of the roof, the iron rails along the sides, the heavy riveted plates that reinforce the corners, and the dark, oily patches where the cables attach. The floor of the cage is made of thick planks laid side by side, and these planks are worn smooth in the center where the miners' boots have trodden over the years, the wood polished to a dark, shiny finish that reflects the lamplight in a dull gleam. You look down at your own boots, and you see that the toes are now coated with a fine, black layer of coal dust from the cinders of the yard. The dust has settled into the creases of the leather and dulled the surface, and when you shift your weight, tiny puffs of the dust rise from the seams and drift away. The other men's boots are the same, covered in the same fine black film, and the cinders beneath the group are crushed and scuffed from the passage of many feet. A single empty coal tub stands on a short section of rail track near the engine house, its iron body rusted in patches, its wheels dark with grease, and it waits there with a kind of patient emptiness that is very quiet to observe. The sky above the pit yard is now a deep, muted blue, the stars beginning to fade one by one as the very first hint of dawn creeps up from the eastern horizon. The blackness of the night is lifting, replaced by a soft, grey-blue tone that makes the outlines of the buildings and the headframe seem sharper and more solid. The winding wheels continue to turn, their black spokes cutting through the pale sky with a slow, constant motion, and the cables rise and fall with a gentle, rhythmic whisper that is now the dominant sound in the yard, accompanied by the steady thump of the steam piston and the occasional distant clang of a signal bell from deep within the shaft. The chimney smoke still rises, but it is paler now, more white than grey, and it catches the first faint light of the approaching dawn, glowing very softly against the dark blue of the sky. You stand with the group, your lamp held still, and you feel the cold of the early morning beginning to recede. Just a little, not because the air has warmed, but because your body has grown accustomed to it, your skin and your blood and your muscles settling into a state of quiet, comfortable alertness. The minutes pass with no sense of hurry, each moment exactly like the one before, the same quiet gathering, the same patient stillness, the same low hum of the machinery, and the same soft, steady breathing of the men around you. The pithead waits with the same patience, its wheels turning, its cables humming, its shaft exhaling the cool, damp breath of the deep earth, and you wait with it, a single, dark figure among many, standing at the edge of the great dark hole that will soon carry you down into the quiet, endless rhythm of the coal seam far below. The onsetter moves now, his thick coat rustling softly as he shifts his weight from one foot to the other, and he turns toward the wooden lever that stands upright beside the shaft gate. The lever is a stout, weathered pole of ash, its surface dark with years of handling, and it fits into a cast-iron bracket that is bolted to the heavy post. He grasps the lever with both hands, his fingers curling around the smooth wood, and he pulls it toward himself with a single, unhurried motion. The mechanism clanks somewhere beneath the ground, a series of iron levers and rods that run down alongside the shaft and connect to the signaling bells, and then the gate in the low wooden fence swings open, its hinges moving without a sound, and the way to the cage is clear. The onsetter steps back and nods once, a small economical gesture that is both an invitation and a routine acknowledgement of the men who wait in the cold, and the group begins to move. You step forward with the others, your boots crunching on the cinders one last time before you reach the smooth wooden planks that form the approach to the cage. The planks are thick and solid, worn to a dark polish in the center, and they slope very slightly downward toward the shaft mouth, guiding your feet toward the iron threshold. The cage waits directly ahead, its open side facing you, its interior a small dark rectangle of space, lit only by the faint glow of the lamp on the post and the scattered lights of the miner's own hand lamps. The roof of the cage is low, just high enough for a man to stand upright without stooping, and the iron railing that runs around the perimeter is cold and black, its surface rough with a fine coat of rust and coal dust. The floor of the cage is made of the same thick planks as the approach, and it trembles almost imperceptibly under the tension of the cables that stretch upward into the darkness of the headframe. You pause at the threshold, waiting for the men ahead of you to find their places, and then you step over the low iron lip and onto the floor of the cage itself. The wood gives slightly under your weight, a tiny, springy movement that is barely noticeable, and you feel the whole structure settle just a fraction as you take your place near the back rail. The air inside the cage is cooler than the air outside, a steady current of damp, underground breath that flows upward from the shaft and wraps around your ankles and your wrists and the back of your neck. It carries with it the same deep, mineral smell that you noticed in the yard, but stronger now, more concentrated, the smell of wet stone and ancient clay, and the faint metallic tang of iron ore that runs through the strata far below. You turn to face the open side of the cage, your back to the rear railing, and you reach out with your free hand to take hold of the cold metal rail that runs along the side. The rail is a length of iron pipe, smooth and round and slightly thicker than your thumb, and it is cold enough that the skin of your palm sticks to it for just a fraction of a second before the warmth of your hand begins to transfer. You curl your fingers around the rail, feeling the solid, unyielding weight of it, the way it anchors you to the structure of the cage, and you let your other hand hang at your side with your lamp held loosely, its flame burning steadily behind the glass, a small, warm point of light that you will carry down into the dark. The lamp is heavy, its brass reservoir full of oil, and the wire handle presses gently into the crease of your fingers, a familiar, comfortable weight. The other men fill the cage around you, stepping in one by one, their boots making a series of dull, hollow thuds on the wooden floor, and they arrange themselves in a loose, compact group with the easy, unthinking coordination of men who have done this thousands of times. Shoulders brush against shoulders, the rough wool of jackets scraping softly, and elbows bump once and then find their places. The men pack in tightly, not because the cage is small, but because this is the way it is done, a closeness that is practical and unremarkable, and you feel the solid, warm presence of the man on your left and the man on your right, their bodies a quiet, human barrier against the darkness. Their lamps sway gently as they settle, the flames dancing inside the glass chimneys, and the combined light of all these small flames fills the cage with a soft, amber glow that illuminates the faces around you, weathered skin, tired eyes, the dark stubble of early morning, and the flat, dark circles of cap brims pulled low. No one speaks. There is no need for words, no small talk to fill the silence, and the quiet inside the cage is a deep, comfortable thing that settles over the group like a second layer of clothing. You can hear the breathing of the men beside you, slow and even, and you can hear the tiny continuous hiss of the lamps and the distant rhythmic thump of the steam piston in the engine house. The onsetter, standing now just outside the gate, looks over the group once, his eyes moving from face to face, counting silently, and then he reaches up and pulls a second lever, a smaller one this time, and the gate swings shut behind you with a soft, final click. The iron latch engages, and now the open side of the cage is closed, the railing forming a continuous barrier around the group, and the men shift their weight slightly, a collective, unconscious adjustment to the feeling of being enclosed. The onsetter walks to the signaling post, a tall wooden pillar with a series of brass bells mounted on its top, and he pulls a third lever, a long curved handle that connects to a wire running down the shaft. Somewhere far above, a bell rings. It is a clear, high sound, two distinct notes that chime in quick succession. A pure metallic ding-ding that cuts through the low hum of the machinery and echoes very faintly off the brick walls of the engine house. The sound hangs in the cold air for a moment, a tiny bright thread of noise, and then it fades, and for a long suspended second, nothing happens. The cage is still, the men are still, the lamps burn with their steady, silent flames, and the world seems to hold its breath. Then the cage shudders once. It is a single, deep tremor that rises up through the floorboards and into the soles of your boots, a sudden, brief vibration that travels through the iron frame and makes the cables hum with a higher, tighter note. Your hand tightens instinctively on the rail, the knuckles pressing white for just a moment before relaxing again, and the men around you brace themselves with the same automatic, practiced response, their bodies swaying very slightly and then settling. The shudder passes as quickly as it came, and then the cage begins to move. The movement is slow at first, a gradual, almost imperceptible sinking that you feel as a gentle release of pressure beneath your feet. The wooden floor descends, and the world outside the cage begins to rise. The dark outline of the headframe, the pale glow of the lamp on the post, the square of deep blue sky that is just visible above the yard, all of these things slide upward with a smooth, silent motion, and then the brickwork of the shaft mouth closes around the cage, and the daylight vanishes. The transition is sudden and complete, the last trace of grey-blue sky, replaced by the absolute velvet blackness of the shaft, a darkness so deep and so total that it seems to press against the glass of your lamp and push the light back into your eyes. The air changes immediately. The damp, cool current that you felt on the surface becomes a steady, rushing flow of dark air that moves past the cage with a soft, continuous sound, a deep, breathy sigh that fills your ears and makes the flames inside the lamps flicker very slightly, their bright points shivering and then steadying. The air smells of wet rock and old cold clay, a smell that is ancient and patient and utterly without warmth, and it carries with it the faint, dusty scent of the coal seam that lies far below. The walls of the shaft slide past the open sides of the cage, just visible in the lamplight, their surfaces dark and wet and glistening with 1,000 tiny beads of moisture that catch the amber glow and sparkle for a fraction of a second before disappearing upward into the blackness. You watch the walls as they pass, a continuous, slow-moving panorama of dark stone and glistening water, layer upon layer of ancient rock that was laid down in the deep time of the earth. The stone is mostly a dark grey shale, its surface rough and irregular, cracked here and there into thin vertical fissures that seep a slow, constant trickle of water. The water runs down the walls in narrow, glistening rivulets, tiny streams that catch the lamplight and gleam like threads of liquid silver, and they disappear into the darkness below, falling away into the unseen depths of the shaft. In places, the shale gives way to bands of lighter sandstone, a pale buff-coloured rock that is smoother and more solid, and these bands are marked with the faint, wavy lines of ancient ripples, the fossilized memory of a sea that covered this land millions of years ago. The cage descends with a smooth, steady motion, the winding engine above turning the great wheels at a constant speed, and there is no sense of hurry or urgency in the movement. It is a slow, deliberate sinking, a gradual, measured descent that gives you time to notice everything, to feel every small change in the air and the pressure and the sound. The rush of dark air continues, a constant sighing presence that wraps around the cage and you feel it on your face. A cool, moist breath that makes the skin of your cheeks tingle and the tip of your nose grow numb. The smell of the shaft deepens as you descend, the mineral scent growing stronger and more complex, with new notes that were not present near the surface, the faint, sharp smell of sulfur, the earthy, organic scent of ancient, compressed vegetation, and the subtle, metallic tang of iron that seems to come from the very stones themselves. The pressure changes. It is a gradual, creeping sensation that you feel first in your ears, a slow building tightness that presses inward from both sides, as if the air itself is slowly thickening around you. You swallow once, a small, automatic motion, and your ears make a tiny internal popping sound, the pressure equalizing for a moment before it begins to build again. The men around you are making the same small adjustments, swallowing, moving their jaws, tilting their heads slightly to one side, and these tiny movements are the only signs of life in the quiet, lamplit interior of the cage. The pressure continues to increase, a gentle, insistent weight that settles into the spaces behind your eyes and the hollows of your cheekbones, and it is not painful or uncomfortable, but simply present, a physical reminder of the great depth to which you are descending. Droplets of water begin to fall now, released from the roof of the shaft where they have been gathering on the wooden beams and the iron supports, and they strike the roof of the cage with a soft, scattered sound, a series of tiny, irregular plinks that echo very faintly in the enclosed space. The droplets fall at no set rhythm, a random, patient pattern of sound that comes and goes, sometimes a single drop, sometimes 2 or 3 in quick succession, and then a longer pause before the next one falls. The sound is gentle and musical, a quiet, percussive music that joins with the sigh of the dark air and the low hum of the cables to create a slow, hypnotic lullaby. Each droplet makes a tiny, ringing note as it strikes the iron roof, and then the note fades, absorbed by the thick wood and the heavy air, and another droplet falls somewhere else, a slightly different pitch, a slightly different tone. You look up at the roof of the cage, a dark, solid canopy of thick planks that is just above your head, and you see the faint, glistening traces of old water stains, dark, irregular patches that spread across the wood like tiny maps of unknown continents. The water that falls from above collects in small puddles on the roof, and then trickles over the edges, dripping down the sides of the cage and forming tiny, cold rivulets that run down the iron railing and drop onto the floor beside your boots. A single drop lands on the shoulder of your jacket, a tiny, dark circle of moisture that spreads very slowly into the wool, and you feel the faint, cool touch of it through the fabric, a small, quiet sensation that is gone almost as soon as it arrives. The walls of the shaft continue to slide past, their surfaces now marked with the dark, vertical lines of timber supports, heavy, square-cut beams that have been set into the rock to hold the shaft open against the immense constant pressure of the earth. The timbers are dark with moisture and age, their surfaces rough and fibrous, and they are covered in places with a fine, pale growth of some kind of fungus, a soft white bloom that looks almost like frost and glows very faintly in the lamplight. The timber supports pass one by one, a slow, regular procession of dark, vertical lines that flash past the open side of the cage and then disappear upward into the darkness. Between the timbers, the bare rock of the shaft wall glistens and drips, its surface broken here and there by the dark, narrow mouths of horizontal tunnels, the levels that branch off from the shaft at various depths and lead to the working places. Some of these tunnels are lit with a faint, distant glow, the far-off lamps of men already at work, and some are entirely dark, their entrances just black, empty rectangles that hint at the miles of passages that spread out beneath the valley. The cage continues to sink, and the depth seems to stretch out around you, a vast, vertical distance that you can feel in the weight of the air and the pressure in your ears and the slow, steady passage of the dripping walls. The lamps inside the cage burn on, their flames perfectly steady now, the flickering having stopped as the cage entered the deeper, stiller air of the lower shaft, and the combined light of the little flames forms a small, warm bubble of amber that travels downward through the endless blackness. The men stand motionless, their faces half in shadow and half in light, their eyes fixed on nothing in particular, their thoughts quiet and slow and unformed. The descent feels as though it has been going on for a very long time, and yet it also feels as though no time has passed at all, the minutes blurring into a single continuous present of darkness and cool air and the quiet, patient music of the falling water. The pressure in your ears builds one final time, a deeper, more insistent tightness, and then it releases with a sudden, soft pop, and you hear the sounds of the shaft more clearly than before, the sigh of the air, the plink of the droplets, the distant, rhythmic thud of a pump or a fan somewhere in the lower levels. The water dripping from the roof of the cage has become more frequent now, a steadier, more regular pattern of small, cool drops that tap against the iron and the wood, and the floor beneath your boots is damp with a thin, dark film of moisture. The walls of the shaft are closer here. The timber support's more frequent, and the rock itself is darker, a deep, rich black that can only be the coal seam itself, the reason for the shaft and the cage and the men and the village above. The smell of coal is everywhere now, a dense, powdery scent that fills your nostrils and coats the back of your throat, a smell that is at once harsh and familiar, the smell of your work and your life, and the long, quiet hours that stretch ahead of you in the dark. The cage begins to slow. The sensation is subtle at first, a gentle downward pressure that lessens by the smallest degree, and then the cables above hum with a slightly different note, a deeper, more resonant tone that tells of the engine applying the brake. The walls of the shaft pass more slowly now, the timber supports drifting upward with a gradual, decelerating motion, and the dripping of the water seems to slow as well, each drop taking longer to fall, and landing with a softer, more muted sound. The cage shudders again, a small tremor this time, and then it stops entirely, the floor settling with a final, solid thud that vibrates up through your legs and into your spine. The descent is over, and the cage hangs motionless in the deep, quiet darkness, suspended at the bottom of the shaft, the gate still closed, the men still silent, the lamps still burning with their steady, patient flames. The gate of the cage swings open with a low, oiled sound, a smooth, metallic glide that ends in a soft click as the latch engages against its catch, and the men begin to move, stepping out one by one into the brick-lined tunnel that opens directly before you. There is no rush, no jostling, only the slow, orderly dispersal of dark figures into the larger darkness, their lamps held out ahead of them like small floating moons. You wait your turn, your hands still resting on the cold iron rail, and then the space in front of you clears and you step forward, your boot crossing from the wooden floor of the cage onto the solid, packed surface of the tunnel floor. The transition is immediate, a change from the slight spring of the planks to the firm, unyielding hardness of the ground, and you feel it through the soles of your feet as a quiet, grounding sensation that tells you the journey downward is complete, and the horizontal journey is about to begin. The tunnel stretches away before you, a long straight passage that narrows into the darkness, its walls and ceiling constructed of dark red brick, laid in a neat, even bond. The bricks are old and stained, their surfaces coated with a fine black film of coal dust that has settled into every pore and crevice over decades, and in the lamplight they gleam with a dull, velvety sheen that makes the tunnel look as though it has been carved from a single block of dark, compressed earth. The mortar between the bricks is pale grey in places, almost white where it has been protected from the dust, and it forms a fine, regular grid that lines the tunnel from floor to ceiling, a pattern that repeats and into the distance, drawing your eye forward along its endless, converging lines. The ceiling is arched, the bricks radiating outward in a smooth curve that rises to a central point just above your head, and the arch is supported at intervals by heavy wooden beams that span the width of the tunnel and rest on squat brick pillars set into the walls. These beams are dark with creosote, their surfaces rough and fibrous, and they bear the weight of the rock above with a quiet, patient strength that has held for many years. You begin to walk, your lamp held low and steady in front of you, and the other men move off in different directions, some ahead of you, some behind, their footsteps creating a scattered, irregular rhythm of soft thuds and scrapes that echoes very faintly off the brickwork. The tunnel floor is made of packed earth and crushed shale, a dark, gritty surface that is slightly uneven, and your boots make a low, crunching sound with each step, a sound that is deeper and softer than the one they made on the cobbles or the cinders above. The floor slopes very gently downward, a barely perceptible incline that guides you deeper into the earth, and you walk with the slight, forward lean of a man, descending a long, shallow hill, your weight settling onto the balls of your feet and your stride shortening just a little to accommodate the gradient. The air here is noticeably warmer than it was in the shaft, a close, still warmth that wraps around you like a heavy blanket, and it carries with it the deep, dense smell of the mine, a smell of coal and clay and old timber, and the faint, sharp tang of the lamps that burn in the darkness. The warmth seeps into your jacket and your trousers, a slow creeping heat that feels almost solid, and you feel the cold of the surface morning begin to melt away, replaced by a comfortable, drowsy heat that makes your eyelids feel slightly heavy. Your lamp illuminates a small circle of the tunnel around you, a shifting pool of amber light that moves as you move, picking out the details of the walls and the floor and the low, arched ceiling. The bricks are not uniform, their surfaces pitted and chipped and worn smooth, in places where the shoulders of countless miners have brushed against them over the years, and the dust that coats them is not a smooth layer, but a complex, textured surface of tiny ridges and valleys, like a miniature landscape of black sand. The wooden support beams pass overhead one by one, their dark, massive shapes appearing at the top edge of your lamp's glow and then sliding backward into the darkness behind you, and each beam has its own character, a particular pattern of grain in the timber, a particular arrangement of the small white fungal spots that grow in the damp, a particular way of creaking very softly as the earth above shifts in its slow, eternal settling. You notice these details without really noticing them, your eyes moving over them with a calm, passive attention that asks nothing and expects nothing, and they become a part of the quiet, repetitive fabric of your walk. The other men's lamps are visible ahead of you and behind you, small, distant points of light that bob and sway with the motion of their walking, and they form a scattered constellation that stretches out along the tunnel like a string of low, earth-bound stars. The lights move independently, each one tracing its own path through the darkness, some turning off into side tunnels that branch away to the left and right, their entrances just visible as darker rectangles in the brick walls. You pass one of these side tunnels, its opening a low, narrow archway that is not lined with brick, but cut directly into the dark shale of the seam, and a faint, cool draught of air issues from it, carrying the smell of damp rock and the distant, almost imagined sound of dripping water. A single lamp glows far down this side passage, a tiny, stationary point of light that marks where a man has already begun his work, and you walk past it without slowing, your eyes returning to the main tunnel ahead. The sound that you first noticed as a distant, rhythmic thud when you stepped out of the cage is now a little louder, a little more distinct, though it is still far away and muffled by the dense, heavy air. It is a low, percussive sound, a deep, resonant thump that repeats at regular intervals, perhaps once every few seconds, and it is followed by a secondary, softer sound, a kind of scraping or sliding noise that fades almost as soon as it begins. This is the sound of the coal face, the place where the hewers are already at work, swinging their picks into the dark seam and then drawing the broken coal back with their shovels, and the rhythm of it is steady and unchanging. A slow, mechanical heartbeat that fills the tunnel with its quiet, persistent presence. The sound travels through the rock as much as through the air, and you can feel it in the soles of your boots as a very faint, very deep vibration, a tiny rhythmic pulse that seems to come from the bones of the earth itself. You continue to walk, and the tunnel begins to change around you. The neat brick lining grows rougher and less regular, the bricks giving way in places to bare rock. The dark, glistening shale of the coal measures that has been cut and blasted to create the passage. The rock is black and shiny, its surface slick with moisture and streaked with the pale, dusty marks of the miner's tools, and it reflects your lamplight in 1,000 tiny, glinting points. The ceiling becomes lower, the arch flattening out, and you find yourself stooping just a little, your shoulders hunching forward, and your head dipping to avoid the rough, uneven rock above. The floor grows rougher too, the packed earth replaced by a surface of broken shale and loose coal fragments that crunch and shift under your boots, and you pick your way forward with a slow, careful tread, your feet finding the firmest spots by instinct. The tunnel walls are closer now, barely wider than the span of your arms, and the sense of enclosure is complete, a deep, enveloping closeness that feels less like confinement and more like a quiet, protective embrace. The distant thud grows steadily louder as you walk, the sound resolving into its component parts, the sharp, solid crack of the pick point biting into the coal, the deeper, softer sound of the wedge of coal breaking free and falling, and then the long, scraping drag of the shovel gathering the pieces and loading them into the tub. The rhythm is slow and unvarying, each cycle lasting perhaps 4 or 5 seconds, and it repeats over and over with a kind of patient, mechanical regularity that is very soothing to listen to. The sound is joined now by other, smaller sounds, the faint, metallic squeak of a tub wheel turning on its axle, the low, distant rumble of a loaded tub being pushed along iron rails, the soft, high-pitched hiss of a lamp burning somewhere nearby. All of these sounds blend together into a low, continuous background hum, a quiet, industrial music that fills the tunnel and wraps around you like a second layer of warm, heavy air. You pass a junction where 2 tunnels meet, a wider, taller space where the rock has been cut away to form a small natural chamber, and in this chamber, a single empty coal tub sits on a section of iron track. The tub is a heavy, rectangular box of riveted iron, its sides dark and dented, its wheels greasy and black, and it waits there with the same patient emptiness that you noticed in the tub on the surface, a quiet, inanimate presence that seems almost alive in the flickering lamplight. A short wooden plank bridges the gap between the tub and the tunnel floor, and a shovel leans against the tub's side, its blade worn to a bright silver edge from constant scraping, its handle smooth and dark with sweat and oil. You look at these objects as you pass, your gaze moving over them with the same slow, calm attention. And then you leave them behind, the tunnel closing in again, and the darkness reclaiming the space. The air grows warmer still, the heat now pressing against your face and your hands with a tangible weight, and you feel a fine, damp sheen of sweat beginning to form on your forehead beneath the brim of your cap. The smell of the coal is so thick now that you can almost taste it, a dry, powdery taste that coats your tongue and the inside of your mouth, and it mingles with the faint, oily taste of the lamp fumes and the cool, metallic taste of the damp air. Your breathing has adjusted to the warmth and the closeness, becoming slower and deeper, a steady, rhythmic exchange of air that matches the rhythm of your footsteps and the rhythm of the distant thud. And you move through the tunnel in a state of quiet, drowsy concentration, your body doing the work of walking, while your mind drifts in a calm, empty space. Ahead of you, the tunnel narrows further, the rock walls closing in until the passage is no wider than a doorway, and the ceiling lowers until you must stoop quite low, your back bending and your head ducking down, your lamp held out before you at arm's length to light the way. The floor here is rough and uneven, a jumble of loose rocks and coal fragments that make walking slow and deliberate, and you place each foot with care, testing the ground before you commit your weight. Your free hand reaches out and touches the wall, the rock cool and damp under your palm, its surface rough and gritty with the texture of the coal seam, and you use this touch as a guide, your fingers trailing along the wall as you make your way forward. The wall is scored with the parallel grooves of the pick, the marks left by the hewers who cut this passage, and you feel the ridges and valleys of these grooves under your fingertips, a tactile record of the work that has been done here. The distant thud is very close now, the sound no longer distant, but immediate and physical, a series of deep, resonant impacts that you feel in your chest as much as you hear with your ears. The crack of the pick is sharp and clear, a hard, percussive sound that rings off the rock walls, and the fall of the coal is a deeper, more muffled sound, a low, rumbling thud that vibrates up through the floor and into your legs. Between these sounds you hear the heavy, rhythmic breathing of the hewer, a slow, steady in and out that matches the pace of his work, and the scrape of the shovel, a long, grating sound that seems to go on for several seconds. The sounds are very close now, perhaps just around a bend in the tunnel, and you know that you are nearly at the coal face. You stop for a moment, your hand resting on the cool, damp rock of the wall, and you let the rhythm of the work wash over you. A slow, steady pulse of sound that fills the narrow passage and echoes very softly off the walls. Your lamp burns with its steady flame, the light flickering very slightly as a current of air moves past you, a current that comes from the ventilation system, a cool, fresh breath that has traveled down from the surface through miles of tunnels and shafts to reach this place. The air movement is gentle, barely enough to stir the flame, but it brings with it a faint, clean smell that cuts through the dense, coal-laden atmosphere, a smell of the open sky and the cold morning and the dew on the grass, and it is a quiet, refreshing reminder of the world above, a world that now seems very far away and very unimportant. You push off from the wall and continue forward, stooping low, your lamp held ahead, and you round the slight bend in the tunnel. The passage opens out just a little, the walls widening, and you see ahead of you the glow of another lamp, a bright, steady point of light that illuminates a small dark space at the very end of the tunnel. This is the working place, the area where the coal is being cut, and as you draw closer you see the dark, jagged face of the seam itself, a wall of solid black coal that rises from the floor to the ceiling and stretches away into the darkness on either side. The face is shiny and wet, its surface broken into sharp, angular facets that catch the lamplight and glint like fractured glass. And at its base, a heap of loose coal fragments is piled, a dark, glistening mound that spills out onto the tunnel floor. A pick is buried in the face, its point wedged into a crack, and a shovel lies on the ground beside the heap, its handle propped against a timber support. The hewer is there, a dark, stooped figure who straightens slightly as you approach, his movements slow and deliberate, his face shadowed beneath his cap. He nods once, a small wordless greeting, and then he turns back to the face, lifts his pick from the crack, and begins to swing again. The pick rises in a slow, easy arc, and then it falls, the point biting into the coal with a deep, solid thud, and a wedge of black fragments breaks free and tumbles down the face to join the heap on the floor. The sound echoes once, a short, sharp crack, and then the tunnel falls quiet again except for the rasp of the shovel as the hewer bends to gather the fallen coal and load it into a small, low-sided tub that waits on a section of track just behind him. The rhythm resumes, pick and shovel, thud and scrape, over and over, a slow, steady cycle that will continue for many hours, and you stand at the edge of the working place, your lamp held still, and you let the quiet, patient sound of the work fill your ears and settle into your bones as you prepare to begin your own long, slow day in the deep, dark heart of the mine. The working place opens before you as you take the final few steps along the narrow, rough-hewn passage, the tunnel widening just enough to form a small, irregular chamber at the very end of the seam. The walls here are not brick, but solid coal, a deep, glossy black that seems to absorb the light of your lamp and then give it back as a faint dark shimmer, the surface slick with the moisture that seeps constantly from the rock above. The ceiling is low, propped by two heavy timbers that stand upright against the rib sides, their tops wedged under a crossbeam that bears the weight of the strata, and the floor is a jumbled, uneven carpet of broken coal fragments and fine, dark dust that shifts under your boots with a soft, crunching sound. This is your place, the small, dark corner of the mine where you will spend the long hours ahead, and you enter it with the same quiet, familiar ease with which you enter your own kitchen, your body knowing every dip and rise of the ground, without any need for conscious thought. You pause just inside the entrance, your lamp held out to one side, and you let your eyes travel slowly around the space. The coal face itself rises in front of you, a sheer vertical wall of black that stretches from the floor to the low ceiling, its surface marked by the deep, parallel grooves of yesterday's picking, the dark facets catching your lamplight and glittering with a cold, mineral sparkle. A fine, dark dust hangs in the still air, a haze so thin it is almost invisible, and it settles on everything, the timbers, the floor, the ledge where you will place your lamp. The ledge is a natural shelf cut into the ribside, a flat, horizontal niche in the coal just large enough to hold your lamp securely, its surface worn smooth by years of use. You walk to this ledge now, your boots crunching softly on the loose fragments, and you set the lamp down with both hands, making sure the base sits flat and the flame burns clear and steady. The light pools outward from the ledge, casting a warm amber glow across the face and the floor and the dark, waiting pick that leans against the ribside just beside it. You stand for a moment, letting the silence settle round you after your long walk, and you listen to the sounds of the mine. The distant thud of other picks, muffled and rhythmic, reaches you through the rock, a slow, patient heartbeat that seems to come from all directions at once. Closer, you hear the soft, constant hiss of your own lamp and the faint, whispering current of the ventilation air as it moves through the tunnel behind you. a cool, gentle breath that touches the back of your neck and then drifts away. The coal face is silent, waiting, its dark surface holding the memory of every swing you have ever made, and you feel the quiet, familiar pull of the work ahead, a gentle, wordless invitation to begin. You turn to the pick, which leans against the rib side at a slight angle, its handle dark and smooth from years of handling, its iron head heavy and solid, with a pointed tip on one side and a flat chisel edge on the other. The handle is made of hickory, a long, straight pole that fits the grip of your hands perfectly, and the head is fixed firmly to it with a wooden wedge that has been driven deep into the eye and trimmed flush. The iron is dark, with a fine coat of oil and coal dust, and the cutting edges gleam dully in the lamplight where they have been sharpened by the colliery blacksmith. You reach out and take hold of the handle just above the head, lifting the pick from its resting place and bringing it across your body until you hold it in both hands, the left hand near the end of the handle and the right hand just below the head, and you feel the familiar weight of it settle into your palms and pull gently downward. The weight is substantial, perhaps 10 pounds of iron and wood, and it feels solid and balanced, an extension of your arms that you have wielded for more years than you can easily count. You turn now to face the coal face, your boots shifting on the uneven floor to find a firm, comfortable stance. Your feet set a shoulder's width apart with the left foot slightly forward. The face is close before you, no more than an arm's reach away, and you look at its dark, glittering surface, studying the pattern of cracks and joints that run through the seam. You pick your spot, a place where a natural fissure runs vertically through the coal, a hairline crack that will open easily under the point of the pick, and you raise the pick in a slow, smooth arc, the iron head lifting upward and backward over your right shoulder, your arms moving with the easy, practiced motion of long habit. The pick pauses at the top of its arc, for just a fraction of a second, hanging there in the lamplight, and then you swing it forward and downward, letting the weight of the head do the work, your hands guiding the handle but not forcing it. The point bites into the coal with a deep, solid crack, a sound that is both sharp and muffled, a hard, percussive thud that echoes very briefly off the low ceiling and then fades into the dense, heavy air. The impact travels up the handle and into your hands as a short, firm vibration, and you feel the coal give way, the wedge of black material splitting away from the face along the line of the fissure and sliding free, a slab perhaps an inch thick and the size of a dinner plate that tumbles down the face and lands on the pile at your feet with a soft, crunching thud. A puff of fine black dust rises from the point of impact, a small dark cloud that billows outward and then settles slowly, drifting down through the lamplight like a shower of tiny dark snowflakes. Some of the dust lands on the sleeves of your jacket, a fine dark powder that clings to the rough wool and forms a pale grey coating, and you feel the faint tickling sensation of it on the skin of your wrists. You pause, lowering the pick and resting the head on the floor for a moment while you breathe, your chest rising and falling with a slow, steady rhythm. The air is warm and thick with the smell of fresh coal, a rich, earthy scent that fills your nostrils and the back of your throat, and you feel a fine, damp sweat beginning to form on your forehead beneath the brim of your cap. You wipe your brow with the back of your sleeve, a quick, automatic gesture, and then you look at the face again, studying the new surface that your last swing has revealed. The coal where the slab broke away is a little lighter in color, a dark matte gray with a faint silvery sheen, and it is smooth and even, the grains of the ancient compressed vegetation just visible as a fine layered texture. A new crack is formed to the right of the first one, a thin, jagged line that promises another easy break, and you shift your stance slightly to bring yourself into the best position for the next swing. You lift the pick again, the same slow, easy arc, the head rising over your shoulder, and then you swing, the point biting into the coal at the top of the new crack, and another slab breaks free, a little smaller this time, a wedge-shaped piece that skitters down the face and lands on its edge before toppling over into the growing pile. The sound is the same deep, dull crack, a sound that seems to travel outward through the coal seam, joining the distant thuds and cracks from the other working places, merging into the quiet, constant rhythm of the mine. You swing again, finding a third spot, a place where the coal is softer and more fractured, and the pick sinks in deeply, the iron head disappearing almost to the shaft, and you must pull back with a short, firm tug to free it, the coal releasing with a low, grinding sound. A larger piece falls this time, a block the size of a loaf of bread, and it lands with a heavy, satisfying thump that vibrates up through the soles of your boots. The rhythm begins now, a slow, steady cycle that your body falls into without any conscious effort, the pick rising and falling, the coal cracking and tumbling, the dust rising and settling, over and over in a quiet, endless loop. You swing, the pick bites, the coal falls, and then you pause just long enough to shift your stance or wipe your brow, and then you swing again. The work is not hurried, not frantic, but rather a calm, methodical process that follows the natural pace of your breathing and your heartbeat, each swing separated from the next by a few seconds of stillness, a few seconds of quiet, in which you listen to the sounds of the mine and feel the slow, steady pulse of the earth around you. The face gradually changes shape as you work, the flat, vertical surface becoming stepped and irregular, the upper part now recessed by several inches, the lower part still jutting outward, and you work your way across it from left to right and then back again, a slow, systematic progression that covers every inch of the seam. After a time, when the pile of loose coal at your feet has grown large enough to impede your stance, you lean the pick against the rib side and take up the shovel. The shovel is a simple tool, a broad, flat blade of iron that is slightly curved at the edges, attached to a shorter, thicker handle of smooth, dark wood. The blade is worn bright along its cutting edge from constant scraping, and the handle is polished by the grip of your hands, a smooth, warm surface that fits comfortably into your palms. You bend to the pile, stooping low, and you slide the shovel blade under the heap of broken coal, pushing it forward with a short, firm thrust, the iron scraping against the rock floor, with a low, grating sound that seems to go on for several seconds. You lift the loaded shovel, the coal fragments glittering dully in the lamplight, and you turn toward the tub that waits on its section of iron track just behind you. The tub is a low-sided, rectangular box of riveted iron, its interior already partly filled with the coal from your earlier swings, a dark, jagged mound that rises nearly to the rim. You swing the shovel over the side of the tub and tilt it, the coal sliding off the blade with a soft, clattering sound. A rapid series of small, hard impacts as the fragments tumble into the tub and settle among the others. A puff of dust rises from the tub as the new coal lands, a fine, dark cloud that billows upward and then drifts away, and you pause for a moment to let it clear before you bend again to the pile. You repeat this motion several times, the scrape of the shovel, the lift, the turn, the tilt, the clatter of the falling coal, over and over, until the pile at your feet is reduced to a thin, scattered layer of fine dust and small, unusable fragments. The tub is now noticeably fuller, the mound of coal rising above the rim in a dark, jagged peak, and you know that soon it will be full enough to be pushed away and replaced with an empty one by the putters who work the main tunnel. But that is not your concern now, and you set the shovel aside, its handle propped against the timber support, and you take up the pick once more. You resume the rhythm, the pick rising and falling, the coal cracking and tumbling, and the work becomes a quiet, meditative flow that seems to carry you along with it, your body moving, and your mind drifting in a calm, empty space. The sounds of the mine wrap around you like a thick, heavy blanket, the distant thuds and cracks, the scrape of shovels, the low, constant hum of the ventilation fan somewhere far above, and beneath all of these the deep, underlying silence of the earth. A vast, patient stillness that stretches away in all directions for miles and miles. Your lamp burns on its ledge, the flame perfectly steady, the oil inside the reservoir giving off a soft liquid whisper as it is drawn up through the wick, and the circle of light it casts remains constant, a warm amber bubble that encloses you and your work and the small dark chamber in which you stand. Time passes, though you have no way of measuring it down here in the dark. You do not count the swings of the pick or the loads of the shovel, and you do not wonder how many hours have passed or how many remain. You simply work, swing after swing, the same motion repeated over and over with the same calm, unhurried pace, and the coal face retreats slowly before you, inch by inch, foot by foot, while the tub fills and is replaced and fills again. You pause now and then to rest, leaning the pick against the ribside and standing still for a few moments, your hands resting on the handle, your breathing deep and slow, your eyes moving over the dark, glittering face with a quiet, patient gaze. During these rests, you listen to the mind, picking out the individual sounds from the general hum, identifying the distant work of the men you know, the particular rhythm of a particular pick, the familiar squeak of a particular tub wheel, and these small, familiar sounds are comforting in their ordinariness, a quiet reminder that you are not alone in the dark. Then you lift the pick again, and the rhythm resumes, the slow, steady cycle of swing and crack and fall, and your mind drifts further, loosening its hold on the small, immediate details of the work and floating outward into a state of calm, drowsy awareness. Your body continues to move, the pick rising and falling, the shovel scraping and lifting, but your thoughts are somewhere else. Nowhere really, just a quiet, empty space of silence and darkness and the gentle, rhythmic pulse of the work. The coal face glitters in the lamplight. The dust hangs in the air, the warm, heavy atmosphere presses against your skin, and you move through it all with the same slow, patient grace. A single dark figure in a single dark chamber, far below the waking world above. The work is a quiet, endless loop, and you are a part of it, a small, steady note in the deep, slow music of the mine. The pick rises and falls with a slow, steady rhythm that seems to have no beginning and no end, the iron head lifting in a smooth arc over your shoulder and then dropping forward, the point biting into the black, glittering face with that same deep, solid crack you have heard 1,000 times this morning and 1,000 times across all the mornings of your working life. The sound echoes very briefly off the low ceiling, a short, percussive note that bounces once off the dark, damp rock and then fades into the dense, heavy air, joining the distant chorus of other cracks and thuds that drift through the coal seam from the working places far away. You no longer hear these sounds as separate events, each individual impact distinct and measurable, but rather as a continuous, low hum that fills the mind like water filling a deep, dark pool, a constant, gentle pressure of noise that wraps around you and holds you in its quiet, patient embrace. The pick swings again, your arms moving with the ease of complete familiarity, the handle sliding through your grip, and the head finding its mark without any conscious aim, and another wedge of coal breaks free from the face, a dark, jagged piece that tumbles down and joins the growing pile at your feet, with a soft, crunching thud. Time has softened here in the darkness, losing the sharp edges and rigid divisions that govern the world above. There is no clock on the wall of this small chamber, no bell to mark the passing of the hours, no rising or setting of the sun to measure the progress of the day. Only the slow, unvarying rhythm of the work and the steady, patient flame of the lamp that burns on its ledge. You do not know how long you have been here, and you do not wonder, for the question has no meaning in this place where one moment flows into the next without seam or boundary, a single, continuous present of lamplight and coal dust and the quiet, repetitive motion of your own body. The pick rises, the coal falls, the shovel scrapes, and each of these actions is both new and eternal, happening for the first time and happening always. A quiet, endless loop that carries you along with it as gently as a slow, deep river carries a fallen leaf. You pause now and then, straightening your back and letting the pick head rest on the floor, the handle leaning against your hip while you breathe the warm, still air and let your eyes move slowly over the face. The coal glitters in the lamplight, its fractured surface a mosaic of dark, shining facets, and the fine black dust that hangs in the air settles onto your sleeves and the back of your hands in a thin, velvety layer that is soft to the touch. You wipe your brow with the back of your sleeve, the wool rough and damp with sweat, and you feel the cool, gentle current of the ventilation air as it moves past you, a constant, refreshing breath that flows from the main tunnel and brushes against the back of your neck before drifting away into the deeper darkness. This current is always there, a quiet, invisible presence that carries the faint, clean smell of the upper world, a smell of wet grass and cold stone and the open sky, and it is a small, steady comfort that you notice without really noticing. a familiar, grounding sensation that ties you to the surface even as the hours pass uncounted in the deep. When the pile of loose coal at your feet grows too large, you set the pick aside and take up the shovel, the handle smooth and warm from your grip, the blade warm bright along its cutting edge from years of scraping against the rocky floor. You bend to the pile, stooping low, and you slide the shovel beneath the broken fragments, the iron making a low grating sound that rises and falls with the motion of your arms, a long drawn-out rasp that seems to echo very softly off the close dark walls. You lift the loaded shovel, the coal fragments glittering dully in the amber light, and you turn toward the tub that waits on its section of track, the tub that you have filled and emptied and filled again so many times that you have lost count, the tub that is now nearly full, its dark, jagged contents rising above the iron rim in a loose, uneven peak. The coal slides off the shovel with a clattering sound, a rapid series of small, hard impacts as the fragments tumble into the tub and settle among the others, and a puff of fine black dust rises from the pile and drifts slowly upward, catching the lamplight and swirling in a lazy, graceful cloud, before it dissipates into the darkness. You repeat this motion several times, the scrape and lift and tilt and clatter blending into a quiet, repetitive music of their own, and then the pile is gone, reduced to a thin, scattered layer of dust and small, unusable chips, and the tub is full and waiting, and you set the shovel aside and take up the pick once more. The tub does not wait for long. Some time later, though you could not say how much later, you hear the faint, distant sound of a tub wheel squeaking on its axle, a high, thin note that grows gradually louder, and then a putter appears from the darkness of the tunnel, a young lad with a cap pulled low and a lamp hooked to his belt, his face smudged with coal dust and his eyes bright in the dim light. He does not speak, for words are unnecessary here, and he simply uncouples the full tub from the small train of empty tubs he has brought with him, and then pushes the full tub away down the track, the wheels rumbling softly over the iron rails and the squeak fading back into the distance. He leaves a fresh, empty tub in its place, its interior dark and clean and waiting, and then he disappears into the tunnel with a single, quiet nod, his lamp bobbing away until it is just another distant star in the long, dark corridor. You watch him go without thinking, your eyes following the light until it vanishes, and then you turn back to the face and the work continues, the pick rising and falling, the coal cracking and tumbling, the shovel scraping and lifting over and over, a slow, steady tide that never stops. Your body moves now with a smooth, automatic grace that requires no thought or effort, your muscles finding their rhythm and holding it, your breathing deep and even, your heart beating with a slow, steady pulse that matches the cadence of the pick. The world has narrowed to a small circle of amber light, the glow of your lamp reflecting off the dark, wet coal, the rough timber props, the iron tub, and the dust that hangs in the air like a fine, dark mist. Beyond this circle, there is only the deep velvet blackness of the mine, a blackness so complete that it seems almost solid, pressing gently against the edges of the light and containing within it the miles of tunnels and shafts and the immense ancient weight of the earth above. You are aware of this blackness as a constant, quiet presence, not threatening or oppressive, but simply there, a vast, patient stillness that surrounds your small bubble of light and holds it in its dark, eternal palm. The blackness is warm and close, and it seems to breathe with the same slow rhythm as your own lungs, a deep, subterranean exhalation that has been going on for millions of years and will continue for millions more. You stop for a moment to drink from the tin water bottle that you brought with you, the bottle wrapped in a piece of cloth and tucked into a niche in the ribside where the rock is cool. The water is cool and clean, tasting faintly of the metal cap and the cloth wrapping, and you drink slowly, letting the liquid wash the coal dust from your throat and the back of your mouth, feeling it travel down into your stomach with a small, pleasant coolness. You replace the cap carefully, screwing it tight, and you tuck the bottle back into its niche, and then you stand still for a little while, your hands resting on the handle of the pick, your gaze drifting into the middle distance where the lamplight meets the darkness and blurs into a soft, amber haze. In this stillness, the sounds of the mine rise up around you with a new clarity, the distant thuds and cracks of the other hewers, the low, constant hum of the ventilation fan, the faint, metallic drip of water falling somewhere far away, and beneath all of these, the deep, underlying silence that is the true voice of the earth, a silence so profound and so complete that it seems to have a texture, a smooth, heavy weight that presses gently against your eardrums and fills your mind with a quiet, empty peace. You pick up the pick again, the handle cool and smooth in your hands, and you resume the rhythm, the slow, steady cycle of swing and crack and fall that has become the whole of your world. Your mind drifts as you work, loosening its hold on the small, immediate details of the coal face and floating outward into a state of calm, drowsy awareness that is neither sleep nor waking, but something in between, a quiet, dreamlike state in which thoughts come and go like slow, lazy clouds drifting across a pale, empty sky. You think of nothing in particular, and yet you think of everything at once. The dark cottage you left behind, the cold tea and the bread on the table, the gas lamp hissing on its bracket, the cat sliding out from behind the water butt, the stars fading in the pale dawn sky, all of these images floating through your mind in a slow, gentle procession, each one as clear and as vivid as a painting, and then fading, replaced by the next without hurry or attachment. The images are not memories so much as presences, quiet, familiar companions that walk with you through the long dark hours, and they bring with them a sense of deep, abiding calm, a feeling that all is well and all is as it should be here in the warm, dark heart of the earth. The lamp burns on, its flame as steady and as unwavering as it was when you first lit it in the darkness of your bedroom, the oil inside the reservoir slowly, imperceptibly being drawn up through the wick and consumed, the glass chimney warm to the touch, the brass collar faintly hot. The light it casts is a soft, amber glow that seems to have a living quality, a gentle, breathing presence that fills the small chamber and pushes back the darkness, and you find your eyes drawn to it, again and again, resting on the small, bright tongue of flame as it dances very slightly, a tiny, continuous movement that is almost hypnotic. The flame is the center of your world now, the fixed point around which everything else revolves, and you watch it during your brief pauses, your gaze softening, your breathing slowing, the flame becoming a quiet, golden doorway that leads to nowhere and everywhere, a small, warm sun that shines only for you. The ventilation current continues its quiet, steady flow, a cool, gentle breath that moves through the tunnel and brushes against your skin, and you feel it as a constant, soothing presence, a reminder that the world above still exists, that the sky is still there, and the air still moves, and the grass still grows, even as you stand here in the deep, dark stillness. The current carries with it the faint, distant smells of the surface, and sometimes you catch a hint of something specific, the wet, earthy scent of the fields after rain, the sharp, clean smell of frost on a winter morning, and these small, fleeting scents bring a quiet, wordless comfort that settles into your chest and spreads outward, a warmth that has nothing to do with the temperature of the air. You breathe them in, these tiny, distant gifts from the world above, and then you let them go, your attention returning to the face and the pick and the slow, steady rhythm of the work. The coal face retreats before you inch by inch, foot by foot, the dark, glittering wall slowly giving way to the persistence of your labor, and the pile of broken fragments grows and shrinks and grows again, a dark, shifting tide that marks the passing of the hours. You work your way across the face, from the left rib side to the right and back again, cutting a narrow, even shelf into the base of the seam, then cutting another shelf above it, a slow, methodical progression that follows the natural joints and fissures of the coal. The rock above the seam is a dark grey shale that is harder and more brittle than the coal, and it occasionally breaks off in thin, flat plates that clatter to the floor with a sharper, higher sound, a sound that is different from the dull crack of the coal, but just as familiar, just as much a part of the quiet, unvarying music of the mine. You pick up these shale plates and toss them aside, stacking them against the rib where they will later be used to pack the goaf. The empty space left behind as the face advances, and then you return to the coal, the pick swinging again, the rhythm resuming. The putter returns and then returns again, the squeak of his tub wheel a familiar intermittent punctuation in the long, slow sentence of the day, and each time he leaves a fresh empty tub and takes the full one away, disappearing into the darkness with the same quiet, wordless efficiency. You acknowledge him with a small nod each time, a tiny, economical gesture that says everything that needs to be said, and then he is gone, and you are alone again with the lamp and the pick and the deep, patient silence of the earth. The tub fills, the tub empties, and the cycle repeats, and you lose track of how many times this has happened, the number becoming meaningless, just another detail that slips away into the quiet, drowsy flow of time. Your body has settled into a state of calm, steady fatigue that is not unpleasant, but rather deeply satisfying, a warm, heavy feeling that sits in your muscles and your bones and makes every movement feel slow and deliberate and deeply felt. Your arms swing the pick with a smooth, easy motion that seems to require no effort at all, and your legs carry your weight from stance to stance with a quiet, grounded strength, and your breathing continues its deep, even rhythm, the air moving in and out of your lungs with a gentle, tidal regularity. You are not tired in the sharp, urgent way of the surface world, but rather in a soft, blurred way, a tiredness that wraps around you like a heavy, comfortable blanket and makes your eyelids droop and your thoughts slow and your awareness narrow to the small golden circle of lamplight and the cool breath of the ventilation current and the steady, rhythmic pulse of the work. The world above is very far away now, a distant, faint memory that has no hold on you, no claim on your attention. The sun has risen and climbed into the sky, and perhaps begun its slow descent toward the horizon. But you know nothing of this, and you need to know nothing, for your world is here, in this small dark chamber, with the lamp and the pick and the coal and the deep, wordless peace that fills the silence between one swing and the next. This peace is the true gift of the mind, the quiet, abiding stillness that lies at the heart of the dark. A stillness that has been here since the coal was formed from ancient forests and will be here long after the last tub has been hauled to the surface. And you feel it now as a deep, resonant calm that settles into the very center of your being, a quiet, endless present that asks nothing of you and gives everything in return. You stand in the center of your small circle of light, the lamp burning with its steady, patient flame, the coal face glittering before you, the distant sounds of the pit humming their low, eternal song, and you swing the pick one more time, and then one more, the rhythm continuing, the peace deepening, the darkness holding you in its quiet, gentle embrace.